Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock. Welcome to the Hudsonville Public Schools Board of Education work session for Monday, January 22nd of 2024. First up is approval of our agenda.
I move that. Support.
Movement from Mark, with support from Andrew. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, first up is recognition of visitors and hearing of Mr. Crusher.
Our first speaker is Mindy Vandenheuvel. I'll stand behind her.
Thank you. I would like to begin tonight with a thank you. Thank you, Barb, for agreeing to the nomination as board president for the next year. I cannot imagine the stress and other challenges you face because of this position, but I am grateful that you are willing to tackle it head on. Mark and Greg, thank you for supporting Barb as president. Nick, I am pleasantly surprised to see your support and hope that it continues throughout the year. Dawn, Andrew, and Ken, I hope that you can rally around our community and work with the board this year. Each of you took an oath and pledged to work for and with the community in Hudsonville. The position of being a board member is not the place to push any agenda. It is the place to seek out what this specific Hudsonville community desires. The field house is now open for business. Congratulations, Doug, for getting Hudsonville back on the map, but it seems the cart may have come before the horse. The parking currently available does not suffice to meet the needs to a packed house at the field house. In fact, homeowners along the north side of the school on Allen Street have been approached about selling to the school in order to bulldoze their homes into more parking spaces. Are there other solutions? Is Hudsonville too big for one campus? What are the reasons we haven't already split into two? I continue to come back to the individual classroom libraries for English classes. Transparency, transparency, transparency. The district heads smile and nod, for sure. They're all about being transparent until that actually requires them to take action. There's nothing to hide, they say, so give me a list of the titles and authors of each book in each classroom. Teachers are proud to offer so many different themes and subjects, they say, so send me each of the already made book summary permission pages. Hudsonville Public Schools would never intentionally deceive or mislead parents about the curriculum. Great! I look forward to getting a list of all the books sometime this week. I am available to stop by the school tomorrow, Wednesday, or Friday, in case you need me to do the legwork if that would help take the workload off someone else's shoulders. I'll email you, Doug, and we can find a time that works. Why do I continue to come here? Hudsonville has made a decision to expose our children to inappropriate content, whether it is introducing gender issues and feeling-based learning in elementary school, graphic and sexually explicit content in both the middle school and high school books, or the DEI narrative within the entire district. It is not okay to indoctrinate children. Actual teaching allows each student to form their own opinion, shows them how to quantify and assess situations, provides a base knowledge to the pieces of a puzzle we call society. Teachers are supposed to equip students, not ingrain agendas and ideologies. I am here to shine a light onto the issues within this district. I am here to offer solutions. I am here to protect our children.
Aaron Doobie.
Greetings, board, and a thank you to Mr. Davis for bringing up Dr. King in his I Have a Dream speech last week. It is much appreciated. Did you know a few months before that speech, Dr. King was sitting in a jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama, having been arrested in a march he was leading. During that time, some local clergy members and different leaders of the community published a letter admonishing him for his methods and telling him to leave and let them handle the situation, even calling him an outside agitator. Dr. King wrote this in response. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor nor the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. That was from letter from a Birmingham jail. Now, the dream is good. It's inspirational. It's the goal. It's what we should be striving toward. But a dream is nothing without the people willing to stand up and push back and do the work of pursuing the positive piece. Instead of reflecting only on the goal, I challenge all of us and you to take some time to do self-reflection, personally and as a board. Looking back, have we and this board pursued the positive piece, or have we fallen to those that would pursue a negative piece, rewriting timelines and claiming agreement with the dream while opposing the actions necessary to move forward towards it? A few years after his famous speech, and only a few months before his assassination, Dr. King admitted that at many times over those years that dream had become a nightmare, and that some of his optimism had been superficial because there was still a long way to go. But he still had hope. He said, I still have hope. I have hope for the future. I have faith in the future. So let us be the instruments of King's hope. Let us see the dream as the inspiration and the goal that it was meant to be, but use the jail cell as our measuring stick. Thank you.
That is it for our speakers this evening.
First up, we have our high school band update.
So turn on Steeler and Mr. Beal, Mr. Vanderwall, if that's okay. So this is something that we shared with the board in board briefs a few weeks ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, because of the timing, and wanted to revisit, see if there are any questions, and really dive into what the plan is moving forward into next year. So we'll turn over to who's driving. Do you start?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. So we have Mr. Beal here this evening, who's the high school principal, and Mr. Vanderwall, who is one of our band teachers, music teachers, and approached Mr. Vanderwall, gosh, a few months ago now, and Craig and I just started to have a great conversation about the potential future of marching band in particular, and what might it look like if we started to explore hope of growing numbers. We know that we just heard on Thursday evening at our board meeting that we expanded our music requirement, if you will, for 6th grade in hopes of just all kinds of positive things for 6th graders. And so then trying to think about kind of closing that gap on both ends. And so Craig was just eager to dive in and think through what this might look like. Did a lot of research, as you probably saw from board briefs in December, end of November, to surrounding districts and how they offer programming. And so I'm just gonna turn it over to Mr. Beal and Mr. Vanderwall here this evening to jump in and share where we're at in the process and allow you to ask any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks for having us here tonight. I know we shared some information about this earlier and potentially some more briefing, but we wanted to try to set an environment where more students would be willing to sign up for marching band. It's a big commitment. They put in a lot of work on their shows. Many of you have probably seen them not only at the halftime football games, but their competitions. And we want the marching band to be a place where more students are drawn to and grow those numbers to really be able to do some impressive things with their shows. They already do really well and great with the numbers that they do have, but in a school of about 2,000 students, we feel like there's some opportunity there to grow the program. So Craig has been really eager. It's kind of shifting back some requirements or lack thereof that we've had in the past, and then kind of went away from. So we're just excited to see what kind of opportunities we can provide so that it increases numbers for students. So I don't know what they've all seen as far as the presentation is concerned, but I guess I'll turn it over to Craig.
So I feel like with something shifting around, there's a lot of opportunity to maybe look at what exciting things could we offer kids that we might not be offering now. Things that maybe other districts similar to us have or don't have, things that our kids want. And so with some of the, some of the things that might get changed, as we pursue this, there's other opportunities that are opening up too that are beyond marching band, and I think that's a really good byproduct of this. I jokingly tell people, now that I'm older, not younger, they say, you know, what do you think defines your career at Hudsonville? And the joke I always say is one word: construction. Right? But with that construction, it represents a lot of growth and change. And, you know, we're just kind of at a crossroads with what's happening with the music requirement at the younger levels. It just kind of makes sense to me that we would visit this. So I really appreciate Amy and Joel and Jordan. Joel Olson's worked with me on this, on just being able to have these discussions about, you know, what types of things could we maybe change a little bit and offer a new experience to our students. The marching band part of it is such a high profile part of the school district. You know, we love that band. I mean, you know, as an alum, being in that marching band at Hudsonville changed my life. It set my career course to be a band director, right? It's immeasurable. I mean, I'm an alum, so I absolutely love it. But we can do more and we can do better, and it can be, you know, you never want to give the impression that we're not proud of the kids or proud of the program, but what can we do to get to an even better place? And I think this is an opportunity to do that as our district continues to grow. So, how about questions?
We fully understand that we're not expecting Greg to work in the capacity of having 200 kids in the marching band on his own. We know this is going to imply that we might have to have some additional resources for the program, but we have to look at what numbers look like too. And students will start to register in the next couple weeks,
Yeah.
for next year, and that'll really give us a good indicator of what things look like moving forward. We also understand it's change, and there could be some growing pains. It could be a little bit of a lull before we get back to where we would like to be. But I'm very optimistic that we'll get there. And with numbers, will come an opportunity for kids that maybe haven't experienced the rigor, because it's a commitment. But it also teaches a discipline. It teaches you a lot of things other than just a musical instrument, commitment, work ethic with working with other people, and really getting a structure down for your day. So we're looking forward to seeing what this might look like moving forward, and I'm certainly looking forward to an update in about 4 years to seeing how it worked.
So Craig, what do you think do you think this was one of the biggest barriers to the growth of the marching band, that it was something that students had to choose over something else?
I would say in an honest answer, it's been since 2003 that we've had a certain way, but I think that it's affected the overall culture of how that part of our school is viewed, and it's so different than the schools that we're similar to, that we compete against in the competitive world. And in the process of this and speaking to the band directors at area schools, even administrators at other schools, we're the only ones using this model. So, the model is out there for how to really build this and grow it. And, we're just now kind of starting to get more on board with that. But I think, we're offering very, very large classes against the marching band as an experience, right? So there's not a lot of motivation to jump into that. I will say the kids that do it really want to be there, right? But there's a lot of kids too that would love it if they just try it too. So we're hopefully gonna open that door.
So the first year will look a little bit different, right? Because it's not requiring every student to be. If you're a senior next year, it's not. But for freshmen, it will be. And then moving forward. So there'll still be some options for sophomores, juniors, and seniors for that first trimester. And that will jump into the, every year, keep moving till 4 years from now when you'll have kids that have been there for 4 years then. And I, having experienced it also, I will tell you that once you do it, you don't want to leave.
Our retention is very high.
Yeah.
Once we get kids to try it, they like the program and enjoy it. It's very high once they're there, but sometimes you just need to get them there.
Craig, in addition to the significant time commitment, I believe is there a financial commitment as well?
There's both, yes.
Has finances ever, have you ever heard of a student that the finances has prohibited them?
So my entire career, going back 24 years now, we've never told a kid no because of finances. We have a strong booster organization, and we budget, we work that budget, and we know when we go into a particular season, you know, these students maybe can't afford it, or these students are gonna pay less. We do have a system where the families that get on the free and reduced lunch get to be in the band for half price, if they fill out that paperwork. We also have an arrangement where families with multiple kids get half off for every additional kid that's in the group. So we're accommodating that, but we would never tell a kid no because of finances. There's always a way to work it out. I've had families that do well financially sponsor students and say, you know, I'd love to sponsor someone who is struggling financially, but we just wouldn't tell them no because of that.
I'm looking at the PowerPoint from November. Am I reading it right? So like right now we've got 91, or this fall we have 91 in marching band, and then the 3 other bands, there's 63 that are taking those classes that aren't in the marching band.
Correct.
Does that sound right?
Correct.
So in theory, like if all of them signed up, we'd have roughly 150.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what would they be giving up? Like, to,
As far as band classes are concerned,
correct, how does that look for the student who's like, okay, I'm all in on marching band now, I'm making this commitment. What is that, what does that commitment look like?
well, okay, so, like, what does it look like to be a member of the marching band?
And again, I apologize, I'm not in band, so.
No,
it's-
that's okay.
But like, so right now, you've got almost all but one in concert band is not in marching band. So how does their day going to look different?
So those students, like my first hour class, for example, are all students that don't march, but their band hour would switch from first hour to fifth hour.
Okay.
And they would be part of that marching band class. And I think it's important to know too, I mean, this might be obvious, but we're talking about the first trimester of the marching band season, right? Then when that's done, they would go back to their regular concert experiences.
Okay.
So they wouldn't lose that concert band experience all through high school. We're talking only about, and,
They would have 2 bands first try.
yep, and then after
So
the,
they would have 2?
They would not,
They would
they just
just-
switch,
just have
Concert
the one.
goes away for first
exclude the
try.
marching band. then.
Yep.
So they wouldn't really be giving up, like, to answer your question, they wouldn't have to give up another elective or
No.
take a core class in a different try to fit this in and be in instead of.
and, not surprisingly, but there are even a lot of kids, they're sophomore, junior, that take 2 hours of band in a day, cause they might wanna be in jazz band and be in marching band, or, you know, you have kids that just really like that, so those options will still be available too, but yeah, they would do marching band first try, and then they'd have that concert band experience for the rest of the school year, and that involves pat band and winter drumline and winter color guard and all those other things that we offer that would be available to them.
It is an additional commitment outside of the school day,
Yeah.
you know, the marching on Friday nights, the practices in the evenings, the band camp work, and then, you know, when you get into your competition season, but that's first trimester.
I grew up when, early '90s when it was a requirement. I just think like, to your earlier point, kind of like helping with school spirit and culture. I look at Friday night basketball games, the Pat band, you know, it's just different than it was 20, 25 years ago. And if some of the things we're doing in this area can help to
Bolster that.
use
Yeah.
more of that, I mean, that's exciting stuff.
That's exactly what we've been talking about, so I'm glad you bring that up.
We have a big gym to make noise
Yeah,
in.
we do.
You can only pump so much canned music in there. It's always better live.
And Jordan, if I can, some of the opportunities for students are, opportunities to fundraise, opportunities to work. So it's not just that it's, I'll say, a gift, there's opportunity, you
Yeah.
know, your kids have been in.
And bringing more families in means
Yeah.
potentially more booster and support. and
Yeah,
help too.
but it's not there's usually opportunities for kids and families to earn things.
Mhm.
That's correct too, yep.
What's the feedback been so far? Did you guys have a meeting this month already?
So we had a meeting scheduled, but it got canceled because of the snow. So we have one, scheduled for January 31 in the auditorium for any like incoming freshman parents to come and ask questions and meet and talk about it. But the one that we had was last week Saturday and everything got canceled.
The idea of doing this now will help work out some of the kinks by the time our 6th grade group comes through. As you know, music is required for 6th graders. We'll see how many kids sign up starting next week when it comes to 7th and 8th, and then by the time we get to high school, we'll have a lot better handle on
So was this, just out of curiosity, was this sort of suggested change, was this sparked by some kind of survey data? Was it student input, or was it just, hey, we used to do this, other schools surrounding us are doing the same thing, maybe we should take a look at it? Is it kind of a combination?
This was a pre-COVID conversation.
Oh, okay, got it.
And
And then we
it was
slowed down
slowed down
since
because
Got
of COVID, but it was a
Got it.
conversation I think I had our first year.
When we first started.
When we first started, it was like, we have a lot of kids in this high school.
Sure.
How can we represent on a Friday night at a competition similar to what some of our neighboring districts are?
I feel like I have that conversation every time I walk into Gimmons.
Sure, right, oh, really?
Yeah. Everybody's like, hey, aren't you high school band director? Yes, how come the band's so small? I know. I know, we're getting there. So.
It's not wrong.
Craig, to kind of pick up on Andrew's point, one of the things that you do so well amongst many things is your connectedness to the students. So my guess is that you're already hearing from current students, past students, upcoming students, a little bit of vibe. And it's all anecdotal, I get it, it's not, but kind of what are you picking up from students that you're talking to about this, or is it just kind of?
Well, we haven't said much to the students yet about it, largely because we're still trying to sort through what other classes we might offer and what the schedule is gonna look like. I just know that over the years, the kids that are in the marching band are begging for this boost, right? They love their program. We go out, we sit and we watch 250 Rockford kids and 190 Jenison kids. They're just so hungry for it, and their parents are. And you know, even some people that maybe not associated with the band or haven't been in the band, but again, those Gemmons conversations or a Friday night football game, that need is out there in our community too. People ask, people may not realize the inner workings of it, but I mean, people want that. So I know the kids that are really active and part of the marching band are gonna be just really excited about this step. I think knowing the students at the high school so well, some of my current, sophomores, juniors that aren't necessarily marching band students, I think they'll have concerns about, well, what does this mean for me? But I think we have a good plan in place for them to still support them and not make major changes to their high school career at this point, because they're on a path for their classes and graduation and AP and things they wanna take. So, but even a lot of those students that may not be in marching band, they still wanna see that program be successful. They still care about our school and want us to represent. So I mean, I'm not naive enough to think there won't be some resistance or some people that question it. We know that's coming, but overall, I think people will get it and see it's a real positive.
Thanks for your willingness to you and I talked about it, and I know where you're but your willingness to adapt to this change, because one of the things again that you do so well is the breadth of offerings that we have in our community. I mean, I don't think Jenison has winter drum, right? I don't think Granville has winter drum. So we offer winter drum. That's a big successful program, as an example. The Eagle Claw we've started. I mean, continuous improvement is just part of your psyche, and you've done it and you've shown it again and again and again. And sort of here's the next thing. So thank you for your commitment to the kids, number one, to the program, number two, and for your just willingness to go, okay, it's just the next challenge, and we'll figure it out as we go, which is your flexibility, your honesty, your connectedness to the kids is so valuable to us. So,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
We know there could be challenges with students as they progress through their high school career. The conflict with marching band, if you're in a varsity sport, for example, on Friday night looks different. Some kids work around it, some kids are dedicated to both. You'll see kids at some programs that'll have their football jersey on playing a trumpet at halftime, right? You've seen that. So, but we also understand that there could be other commitments as you get later on in your high school career. So there could be options for kids to opt out if they're maybe they're committed to, they have to work because they're doing something, supporting the home, if you will, or they have a commitment with a varsity sport. So we'll work through that when we get there. They're junior and senior year, but we truly feel that once kids get in the program, their freshman and sophomore year, they're gonna stick around. Craig does an amazing job, but we also are not gonna work him to the bone with 250 kids in marching band without getting some help in figuring that out. And to your point about kids that are moved from concert band to marching band, their first trimester, that means the concert band first trimester will only be sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Next year, it will only be juniors and seniors. So the concert band first trimester might shrink a little bit.
And that's where we're looking at opportunities for what else could we
Yeah.
offer, right? Some exciting things that we could do that I just think, I'm excited about some stuff we're talking about, so. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Other questions for Craig and Jordan and Lee?
Sounds great,
Thank you, great job.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks for missing conferences to be here.
Thank you. Go back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our ISBP.
Yeah, that's, Mandy and the team, I think. Oh, they're all right here. I'm looking at as I'm looking at this. So Mandy's gonna give us an update with the team that's here, a bunch of our administrators here. Thank you for your time also for being here, and go there.
Positive behavior interventions and supports is something that align to some of our SOAR 4 goals and will align to our future SOAR 5 goals. And so, as is the case with many of our goals, we have administrative committees that help support that district-wide work. And so I've asked for this committee to come and share a little bit with all of you as we enter a new school year, just sort of a refresh on where we've been and where we hope to go. So I'm going to invite them to come on up to the podium, and we'll kind of divide and conquer the slide deck, and we'll start off with Mr. Mearsma, who is the committee chair.
Thank you. Good evening, board. So, if a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, we teach or punish. Why can't we answer the last sentence as automatically as we do the others? So, PBIS is rooted in what you might say is positive psychology, and some of the research, you may be familiar with John Gottman, who's popular for his marital counseling methodology. In '92, he did some research with 700 couples who had just been given their marriage licenses. And he studied their interactions for 15 minutes, and with 94% accuracy, he was able to gauge whether or not those couples would divorce or stay together. And the reason behind that is he paid attention to the ratios of positive to negative. In the context of schools, what are the implications of that research? Well, as teachers, we're forced to correct children. No teachers want to be negative, but they are forced to correct children. It's part of the work that we do. So we want to be mindful of the relationship bank account. So the ratio of 5 positives to 1 negative or corrective is the gold standard. And in Gottman's research, what he saw is as married couples approach the one-to-one, the relationships cascaded into divorce. So our work with students and teachers, we try to remind teachers to be mindful of that relationship bank account. Different schools and different school districts have different systems for how they acknowledge students for the things that they're doing well. But that all begins at the beginning of the school year, and then at different periods throughout the school year of teaching very succinctly what the expectations are around the campus, in the classrooms, in the hallways, cafeterias, playgrounds, etc.
All right, so how did we get here and what have we accomplished? In 2006, the state put out a mandate that basically said a system needs to be in place in every school system in Michigan that supports the efforts for children or students to manage their own behaviors. That is a great idea, and it seems like there's a big gap between 2006 and 2019 when the district launched our PBIS large-scale initiative. And really what we found between that gap is that each individual building was doing different kind of internal rules. They might have similar rules for how the bathroom or how the hallway should look. They might have some character
different rules or character things. But what we found was the consistency when that student left that building and went to middle school, when that student went from middle school to the high school, that they then had to kind of learn a new culture and learn a new set of rules. Even though it was the same, we walk in the hallway, that was a challenge. So the district launched PBIS in 2019 with the idea that we were going to go with a building level. So we were going to focus on what a bathroom should look like. What should the hallway look like? What should it look like to ride a bus? The concept there is really that tier 1. So it's the idea that having common language for a student to go from my early childhood building to elementary school to middle school to high school, they then have the same language. Absolutely, a high schooler is not going to say walking feet that we say in early childhood, but they do understand that as they age, their language increases and they learn new skills. So PBIS really accomplished the fulfillment of the state mandate, but also it created some continuance with all the opportunities that our children move from one building to another building, and if they buy a house on the other side of town. So this was really the goal of creating building level.
So the next graphic, you may recall, has been shared from Mandy's and or Amy's offices as they've discussed different programs. The essential components of an MTSS framework, a multi-tiered system of support, just think of these as best practices. So when these systems are in place and done correctly, you'll have team-based leadership, continuous data-based decision-making, comprehensive screening and assessment systems, selection and implementation of instructional interventions and supports, and a tiered delivery system. So the tiered system just means we're capturing so many with tier 1, we're going back with tier 2 to capture the rest, and tier 3 for the remainder. The next page, excuse me, you'll see our PBIS system for consistent expectations all across the district. In our buildings, we have consistent language for students and teachers to use. Common language for playgrounds, cafeterias, etc., as Mrs. Van Someren was referencing. We have videos that have been created by PBIS specialists to be shared with students in classrooms. We have a common teaming structure, so teachers and their CST teams or teachers and the PBIS specialists work together to support students.
CST is child study team.
I'm sorry, yes, child study teams in each building. Common referral systems, we use Swiss and PowerSchool. That is for documenting problems, misbehaviors. Common interventions, the PBIS specialists, building leadership, special ed department have worked to develop tier 1 and tier 2 supports for students that are common across the district. And then common data collection, again, when we're doing, when we're entering referrals in Swiss or PowerSchool, we can run reports and we can get a look at trends, and that could be time of day, locations, etc. And then the last graphic that I'll present is just showing the parallels between the PBIS system and the academic system. So both are similar and, again, rooted in those best practices.
This is a diagram, I'll move toward the mic. This is a diagram that you've seen in different settings, similar to what Josh had shared. In academics and in our PBIS, we use this as kind of a description of a classroom. So when we look at that bottom tier, we're looking at about 80% of a classroom or 80% of a building or 80% of a school district. They're going to have students that are, those students are going to be students that have common rules. They're going to be intrinsically motivated to follow those rules. They're going to be the ones that are the line leaders, and they're going to do it without being asked. They're going to be the students that are just really a part of all of those kind of natural things. They're not going to need a lot of support from the teacher other than an organized, managed classroom. Our 15% then is a group of students or a population that is going to need a few more reminders. So they're going to need that reminder. They're going to need a few more lessons. When we get back in January, they're going to need that September lesson again. What are we doing in the school? Why are we doing it? What are our rules? They may need some visuals. They're going to need a little bit more assistance. They're going to be successful because the teacher's going to give them a little bit more. Really similar to academics. They're going to be the students that need a little bit more small group. Our 5%, and sometimes that's 3 to 5%, depending on what kind of a group you're looking at, but that group is gonna need more support. They're gonna need an individual plan. They're going to need maybe a specific plan for them. They're not gonna get through the day without a really individualized day that gives them a 2-minute reminder, that gives them a consequence that makes sense to them, that matches their Minecraft goals, right? They're gonna need something really, really specific because that's the way that they're going to improve. And this is really shown in lots of areas in education, but this is one that we really kind of look at when we look at our data. Lots of times the numbers are gonna range, but generally the larger population is gonna be on that bottom section, and then it's going to gradually get smaller.
So one of the really encouraging things is because this is under the umbrella of MTSS, this is what we might call MTSS-B for behavior, is that we are able to use that opportunity to do sort of a check and balance across our buildings to say, are we meeting our metrics for what we would want to see in a well-functioning Tier 1 PBIS system, and we are able to meet these targets that are in the diagram, if not higher, which is really, really exciting because we know that we see students responding in the way that we hope them to. I know in your packet you have a slide with some percentages. I'd like to do some double checking on that before we share, and I can share a reiteration of that maybe in a board brief. But the emphasis is not on the elimination of behavior in general. It's almost as though because we are a school, we can predict that we will experience some behavior at some given time. Any given day. And so knowing that that is a reoccurring experience, how do we best be prepared for when that happens? How do we best equip our teachers with lesson plans, and how do we equip our schools with teams that can problem solve those individual issues? And so when the question comes up is how do we know if it's working, we look at this diagram first. Are we meeting our targets in this way? But we also know if it's working if we're meeting these outcomes of the system, right? Do teachers, do students, do parents have clarity on these things so that we could all be working in the system effectively? So all of these indicators go into an assessment tool that we review annually, and that sort of self-assessment is then reviewed at our district level by that district continuous improvement team. So I know that maybe one of the questions that you've heard is how do we know if PBIS is working, why do we still have concerns around discipline? And we would say to that is the eradication of behavior is not necessarily the goal here. Our goal is to be preventative, it's positive, to create a positive culture around behavior, and to give kids every opportunity to learn new skills. So there's this piece of it, and also what's really encouraging is this fall we started also collecting data on our effectiveness for Tier 2 interventions. So remember, this is students that they'll still access all of those good Tier 1 practices, but additionally they may need additional supports. And so Tier 2 is hitting that 15% of the population. We did a great review of what's out there in terms of effectiveness, and in implementing those, 87% of students that are falling in that Tier 2 range have shown responsiveness to those interventions, which is very cool for our first run this semester. So hopefully that gives you a little more information on that question, how do we know it's working? So with that, we're going to pivot to a different question related to what do teachers think about PBIS, because we know that you saw some of that data, both quantitative and qualitative, in the survey, and so we have some talking points to that, and I'll turn it over to Delia.
So this past spring, the SOAR data survey went out to students, staff, and parents in the district. Some of the questions were specifically geared towards PBIS and whether they feel like it has been impactful. So I'm going to share some of the numerical statistics, and then we're going to get into some of the comments as well in just a minute. So 67% of Hudsonville teachers agreed the implementation of PBIS has positively affected their work environment. 20% of those strongly agreed in that range. And then 70% of Hudsonville teachers agree that PBIS has had a positive impact, including 20% who strongly agree. So the vast majority of teachers do feel like PBIS is having a positive impact both on their work environment and their students. Some of the other, like I mentioned, we're gonna get into some of the comments, but just some other numbers. We have about 1,200 staff and almost 350 completed the survey. So the survey professionals said that we can count that data with 95% confidence. So we can think on some of this data.
So I think we're all familiar with Amazon and Yelp and Google Review, and the nature of people when responding through commentary with a review is either exceptionally good or exceptionally negative. My wife owned a company for 15 years. She took great pride in making sure that she didn't have any negative reviews. And it wasn't because she wanted 5 stars. It was because she wanted to make sure that the experience that anyone had coming to her business was a positive one. So she would reach out to them individually and try to rectify the situation, seek clarity on the experience, and things like that. Unfortunately for us, in this survey, it was anonymous. So we were left not knowing who said what. So as a team, we kind of look at all the comments and we come up with our own thoughts on what some of the myths are. Ooh, okay, here we go. So 2 common myths that we saw were PBIS means we don't do discipline. PBIS means consistent disciplinary action for the same behaviors. When I was an early educator, I was very black and white. And then through professional growth, going to PDs, going to conferences, I realized that my world and my experience was not that of everyone else's. And my black and white got very small. And my gray got very big. And what that caused is being understanding to each individual student's needs and making sure that the consequence wasn't just based on the action, it was based on the individual. And what we want to make sure is that when we are providing these consequences or disciplinary actions, we take into consideration lots of things. We have the 7 factors that we consider. We have the home life to consider. We have so many things. It's not just a black and white issue. And I think it is important that just as we are providing teaching interventions or math interventions, that when we provide a behavior intervention, that is specific and tailored to that individual student and not just to a certain type of action.
All right, so with the implementation of PBIS, we've done a lot of training since 2019. Many of us were here during COVID, and that was a time where we did a lot of training even over Zoom meetings. So with our whole staff as a district, we had different consultants come in and they did some training, so that was definitely a unique experience. But we wanted to make sure that our staff feels confident in implementing PBIS in their classrooms and in our schools. So part of our staff trainings, they really focused around, first, we wanted that predictable environment. And so we were really working on having that consistent language and what it meant to have a classroom and a school where kids are coming in and that they are feeling safe, so they can have a trusting relationship with the teachers and the staff members. So it wasn't just our teachers that were going to these trainings, we also had our support staff going. Our bus drivers have gone through training. So we've trained everybody in our district to be able to support PBIS and our students. We also, through that predictable environment, we want to make sure that we're meeting the basic needs of our students, and so we even dove into what does that mean for our kids. And I know that if you walk through any elementary building and even at the 5-6 building, that we have teachers that are going down and making sure that they're getting breakfast for those kids that they know their buses are coming in late, and so the kids have something to eat so that they're ready to learn. So it's just, you know, letting our teachers know and our staff know, like, what do our kids need so they can be successful through the day, not only with behavior and academics. And then we also just worked on how do we communicate and create predictable routines for our students. So we not only post them on the wall, they're practicing them, they're doing role plays, and we went through that. We even had staff like practicing it the right way and practicing it the wrong way. Kids will laugh at the wrong way. We try not to focus too much on that, but they do learn that way. So, and then we had trainings just even on predictable responses. And on here it says, individually determined by students' needs. So that means like we're looking at the individual students and what supports do we need to give them so they can be successful in the classrooms. That might be through a tier 2 plan, just to help support what they specifically need. And then we want to make sure that these plans are given to everybody that's going to be working with that child. So that's training every staff member that will be working with them. So we're using consistent language, and so that the kids, it's not gray for them when I go and talk to teacher A, they're going to do the same thing that teacher B is going to do. So we want that consistency. And then we've done a lot of training now with data collection. We've had quite a few years of Swiss data. The middle school and the high school, they have their Power School data. And we've also moved from staff managed and office managed. And so that has been a big change too, that there's certain things that our staff in the classrooms that they are doing and our support staff are doing, and what are predictable responses that they can do for those behaviors. And then we have office managed. If there's this behavior, staff knows they're not the ones to handle it, that they're going to send it to the office because it's one of those more serious ones that involves maybe a little bit more in the consequences. So we've done a lot of trainings, and we're going to continue to do those trainings. One final training that we did was trauma-informed practices, and so that was the one that happened during COVID. We had a lot of training with that, and I know that we're cycling back through, and we use our professional development early release days and our staff meetings to go over just training so everybody's fresh and there's new ideas and things that they can implement right away in the classrooms.
One of the things we talked about to try and decide, like Pete had mentioned, we don't know who the individuals are that had some of the negative comments that were in the SOAR data, and so we're not able to address those people directly or try and help talk or connect with them to find out what it is that drove that comment. We came up with those couple myths that Pete had shown on those slides. But one of the things that we also talked about too is, as administrators, when we have to consider the 7 factors when we look at discipline for a student, is we often know or in the know of the very specifics of the student's information, their background, their history. And because of FERPA, the Families Educational Rights and Privacy Act, we're not able to share that information. So in talking to one parent about the consequence of an act that happened between 2 students, I cannot share the disciplinary outcome for the student that is not theirs. So it oftentimes then is the same for our teachers, where we're not able to share. So if student A is in one classroom and student B is in another classroom, and they only see the outcome of what happened between student A and B, I can't tell the teacher of student A what happened to student B, because that is not the teacher of student B. So in that instance, as intelligent people, we try and connect the dots. And so in the vacuum of knowledge, I try and put into that the narrative that makes sense to me. And oftentimes that is a known frustration. Oftentimes our conversations with parents are like, if I could tell you everything, you would understand, but I am not able to, because that involves the discipline of another child. I hope you appreciate that. And the same is unfortunately true with our teachers. There is a gap of information, and a lot of times it would make a lot of sense if we were able to share all that, but because of FERPA, we're not able to, and that's the law. So those are the things that we looked at there. Some of the next steps of what this team is going to do is we're going to take this SOAR data, those comments, and take them back to our building level teams. Each building has a team of folks. So at the middle school, we have a PBIS team with a PBIS coordinator, and I'm super thankful for that. But taking that information back to our teams, and then each building is going to problem solve through that and try and find out, okay, because each building might be in a slightly different place. You can see we launched PBIS in 2019, and then this wonderful thing called COVID happened, and we all had to pivot and shift our focus and energy into other things, like how are we going to teach from home? And so it created this bit of a gap. We had push and energy, and then this kind of stalled out. So other things that we talked about that might be difficult for where our teachers are, or it might have produced some of these misconceptions or negative comments or negative feelings towards PBIS is perhaps maybe they weren't here for the launch. We've had staff turnover since 2019. Where is everybody at in the process, and what is their background and knowledge and understanding? And so making sure we're trying to fill those buckets for people to backfill what it is they know or don't know. And then we're doing that at the building level because they're more in touch, or we're more in touch at each building on what is happening at the building level and with our teachers and our staff in those buildings and our kids. So those are the things where we're going to take those back. We have a TFI is called, it's provided in PBIS, is something that we do routinely. It's called a tiered fidelity inventory. We do that amongst our team within our building to double check where we're at within implementation. We use that data then to set goals and then to connect with our staff within our buildings on how we're going to reach and meet those goals. One last thing is, looking at all those things is where do we need to go and what do we need to do going forward to make sure that we're reaching out to the folks that we can, the best that we can, to help improve their level of understanding of where we're at, what we're doing now, and where we want to go with PBIS.
So our hope and goal with that was just to be able to address some of those questions that were raised around how do we know it's working, what data points are we looking at, and kind of untangle some of the comments that were shared during the source survey process. We thought it best to have the administrator committee speak. I'm super grateful for them to be here. I know they were just here on Thursday night, so having them again here tonight is great. So do you have any questions for this committee?
When you look at the comments and you talked about, because they are anonymous, is there ongoing professional development for the staff to try to bring those that may be skeptical or having this on board, like regular ongoing?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a professional development calendar that offers monthly PD. I think because we have a number of things to discuss, sometimes we do a little rotation, but as Clint mentioned, one of our key next steps is to ask each building's PBIS team to discuss this at a larger scale within their building, whether that be tackling both of those misperceptions or maybe just looking at their building data or soliciting conversation at the building level at the meeting time that works best for each building. Mm-hmm.
Just a question is, Clint, you were talking about FERPA, and thinking about a teacher and a tier 3 student. Are you still able to work within, say, a cohort of 4th graders who then move into 5th grade? Are you able to share enough data with those who are assigning students to teachers that you don't end up with a teacher who maybe has some traditional tier 3 students with all the tier 3 students?
Yes.
Again, not paying students that they can't change, but
Yeah.
Can you just briefly talk
Sure.
about that?
I think one piece of this is each of them will speak to a lot of thought goes into class placement. And so they are looking at all of the data points for each student to look at distributed class lists. But on top of that, a key term in FERPA is that the person must have an educational interest in the student. And so as soon as that next teacher is identified, they then have an educational interest in that child and they can review that child's record.
And the administrator has an interest in all.
Yes.
Right.
And they don't want to put all the kids in one
Yes.
class.
Yeah. As we look at those lists, we're often leaning on also our school guidance counselors, and they also have an interest in all of our kids. And so they are on board helping us build those class lists to make sure that we don't line folks up.
Appreciate that, thank you.
I guess I still have a question on some of the data, and Ken always brings up the point of, on our reports that we get, like, how are we tracking it and all that? So I'm thinking going forward, we've got a pretty significant investment in this program.
Mm-hmm.
So when I read intervention effectiveness has been 87%, I guess I still don't understand what that means.
Sure.
Like, how can we, not on every month basis, but annually, just over the next several years, what does effectiveness look like? And
Yeah.
how can we report on that? To give the community
Sure.
as much as us the confidence that, hey, this investment that's made is
Yeah.
doing this.
I think one piece, I don't want to speak for Dr. Vanderjagt, but I'm sure we could find a way to put it in the snapshot, some data pieces, but a couple of members mentioned the measurement of fidelity around tiered fidelity inventory, which we could share the full scale with you. There's a couple key indicators that we look at to make sure that what we have in place is going to meet those goals, and we can certainly share out, this is where each building is at, this is their goal for this school year, this is their progress towards that goal, so you can see how they're progressing in that way.
It'd be great.
To some degree, I'm sorry, go ahead. I think to some degree, it's always challenging to get data around a behavior system when behaviors are altered by life experiences also. So it's not like every kid comes in to the same home experience to school the next day. Kids change. We have, our junior class is big, our sophomore class is small. I mean, that changes the dynamics of the class. Different experiences come with different. I think any principal can tell you that sometimes they'll look and say, this third grade class, and then another time they're like, I love this fourth grade. It varies, right? And I think the data, most of the time, the data behind, at least in my opinion, and years of doing this, is the data from the teachers and how is it functioning in your class, and how is it supporting the work of education taking place, or are we spending more of our time dealing with discipline in our classroom? And I think the more resources we give our teachers, that's why I think you see such a high number of teachers saying it has a positive impact in my classroom, and that will be data that we can track, and the conversations that they have with their buildings, because I will tell you, some buildings have a different experience with PBIS than others. You saw that in some of the data, and so it's our job now to try to dig into that and say, okay, what are some of those reasons? Is it because of is it student, staff, supports? There's so many different factors when it comes to what it looks like in every building.
Well, for sure, totally get it, but I think the end size is probably large enough, and if we're looking at longitudinally, there should be some information we can, I get it, you always hear, oh, it's that year or whatever.
Yeah, and to that point, I think sometimes the group information on the effectiveness of students that we're trying to specifically target can be more telling than the aggregate, because from aggregates, we know that there's trends in schools about when behavior's high and when behavior's low. And it's almost like the educator, it's beyond the full moon experience. It's the waves of when we experience that. And we may not be able to change that, but to speak to your question about, you don't necessarily know what does a tier 2 effectiveness score look like. Parents of students that are participating in that group, let's say the intervention is called check-in, check-out, and it's a simple intervention procedure that just aims to build more human connection for the student to get more positive feedback. And if we see that the aggregate for the groups or the students that are participating in that intervention, 90% of them are meeting their goals every week, they may not have an absence of data, but the intervention is working. So I think we can continue to share more data as we finesse.
No, it's great. I
what
mean,
you're
there's a couple of
looking
these data points on this
Sure.
slide that you said maybe need to be adjusted on the percentages. Those look like a couple key metrics
Yeah.
that would be really easy and like relevant information too.
Sure.
So like something simple like that.
Yeah.
It would be nice too, and I'm sure you're already thinking about this. What are there different points in the educational experience where things break down, or if we intervene at this stage, is there a point where it's too late? And I'm never gonna say it's too late, but like, are there these crucial moments where we're really effective when we hit it in first grade
Do you want
or
to say
whatever,
something?
if we can do that?
I can't necessarily speak to that, but I can say that the team-based leadership within each school is in a unique position to respond. So when teachers notice things are off, they can quickly get help through the CST team, the child study team, or the PBIS specialist before things tailspin. So before things get too far out of whack, we can provide supports and bring kids back into line. There's all manner of reasons why kids misbehave in school and check out. Sometimes some things that I've seen responsive and uniquely positioned to help students quickly and teachers quickly.
Randy, one of the slides said that 70% of the teachers were behind it and 30% somewhat frustrated. Based on what you just said, Josh, about the team coming in to help the teachers, 30% seems a high number to me.
Can I just ask, it was 70%, but was it 30% or was there some neutral? And I don't know the Likert scale on that one.
I think that goes to Clint's response, which is to take a deeper look at the building levels, because those numbers I would be surprised if those numbers were reflected in my building. So just digging into where are the pockets where that, where we find those feelings apart. That's not my experience.
Yeah, because I'm just, because whenever you're gonna give somebody extra help, I mean, they're gonna say, okay, I'll take, now I could see one of the situations is if a teacher isn't being told what's happening in another classroom, but once they know that, then, so 70%, seems like a low number to me for all the resources we're throwing. I'm just wondering how we would try to understand where the other 30% are coming from. Not making any judgment or anything, just saying, what's causing those people to be frustrated?
Yeah, can I
Absolutely.
give you my take on
That's
it?
why I asked.
Okay, so in that second data point, 70% of teachers agreed and 21% strongly agreed.
Okay.
So I would be looking at 91% of teachers believe that it's had a positive impact. I do think that what Josh is speaking to in terms of the framework is meant to respond when students start to have a higher number of referrals. I don't know a teacher that wouldn't want that for them and the student, but I do think that the other pieces when Mr. Geerling was speaking to the myths that we kind of see is that they might agree to the support, but they might have feelings about if in their minds we're doing this, but we're also not disciplining the student, right? If from their framework, there should be more suspension, then maybe their feelings about PBIS are reflected in that question, even if the framework and the design aren't really intended to weigh in on that. What they're trying to do is how do we build rapport with the student to best set them up for success in school.
So maybe that slide is giving, pointing in the wrong direction. If what you're saying is 70 and 21, then maybe you should say 91.
Sure.
Instead of 70, because that makes a
I'm
big difference.
gonna interrupt. It is, the slide was correct. It's
Okay,
70.
that's right.
Of the 70, 21 said strong. I'm looking at the slide right now. So,
Okay.
but I to your point, those are the conversations that can take place in the building to say why.
Yeah.
We're not gonna say, okay, if you put your name here, tell us why you didn't like it.
Right.
But the conversations can happen in the building to figure out, is it structure?
Right.
Is it because, you know what, I'm a black and white teacher, I want it to be like this, and the kids should be sent home, and I should get an email knowing it, and so there's a lot of those conversations I think should take place.
Sure. Becky, one of the things that you said was the consistency between buildings now is much better than ever was before. Okay, so every building is acting in the same way. Last year when I was talking to one of the principals, and I was asking them about this PBIS program, they said they had lost outstanding PBIS individual to another school because that school was having more difficulties, and they felt it was better to put a person with this experience there.
Did they lose a PBIS person or a teacher to another building to a PBIS session?
I don't remember, but I thought it was PBIS, but they weren't complaining about that, but they were stating that the person that they got back in return wasn't as seasoned as the other individual who was there prior. Wasn't because of their maybe length of service and stuff like that, or ability to be able to deal with situations, wasn't quite as much up to speed. And you see that in all facets of life. It's not just in this particular thing. What I want to know is that with the consistency that we have, that we expect along all buildings, is there any room for a PBIS specialist who is maybe much more seasoned and has the ability to look at things a little differently? Is that person allowed to, have some freedom of how they're gonna be looking at things, or is that consistency between how we do things in every building? Is that,
So let me give you some
Roxanne.
context.
Yes.
When I say we first got here, because there's a lot of people in this room. In fact, I think Melanie and Becky and Pat were the only ones that were here, right? There were eight elementary schools and potentially 9 different ways of doing support systems. So ECC had their own. South Elementary had a robust system, and they were all over the board. And the best way for us to provide truly professional development is to have a lot of consistency in the district. That does not mean that every building is identical when it comes to how things work, because everybody's different.
Right.
We have 3 4th grade teachers that probably look a little bit different in 3 4th grade classrooms.
right,
But for the most part, we want to be on the same page when it comes to language and expectations, so that when we do have district-wide professional development, we're providing that professional for everybody, not just this building's getting more because of this, or this building's not getting any because they're doing this. So we try to have some consistency along that line. But I will tell you, in Ross's background, I'm not gonna pull you out, but he will tell you that they're all different in their buildings, and but they also work very close together to try to be on the same page, so that if somebody is, quote unquote, having a hard time with some concept or something taking place, they can lean on each other also. And same thing with our building principals, they can lean on each other. The biggest difference would be probably Jamestown upper and lower, because they don't have a consistent K4 or K5 structure.
sure.
The kids are only there with their littles. I mean, the leaders of your building are 2nd graders, right? That's a big ask for a 2nd grader. So, but that is why the consistency was built in. But to answer your question, I think there is innately some flexibility.
Good.
All of our building leaders are different. All
Good.
of our teachers are different. But we still try to use that common language that when they get on the bus, there's an expectation.
Okay,
When they're at other events, there's an expectation.
thank you very much, Dr. Vanderbeek. That hits exactly what I was asking about. Thank you very much.
And I apologize, because this seems weird from finance, but it is that guaranteed and viable system that helps. I mean, there's a lot of things that curriculum does that helps me when it comes to my desk. I'll say, Amy, does this fit the system? And she'll be like, yeah, but, I can tell when it's a purchase that she'd like to take another look at. We have those conversations, but it really does help within the elementary framework for them to be having a common language. Where it really helps is when they go to middle school, and you're not having all the variation we had before, and that's where we expect to see some amazing gains. So thanks for that.
What is the parent response? We've got a bunch of parents who probably have their worldviews of how to enforce behaviors and all of that. What's that feedback like?
I think one of the loudest frustrations was, I want to know what happened to the other kid.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
And that's just something that was shared. We can't, Clint was sharing, we can't just get out there and say, yep, they're up now. Social media sometimes does its own part, because they find out what's going on, but not from us. And so I think that's the loudest frustration. I think innately, I've heard, there's always people on either side, we understand that. But most of the comments were about consistency and behaviors, and some of I've heard from some parents, they love it because some of the language they're using at home, right? And they're talking about just one of the common language that they use on buses, but they're using at home too with their kids when this first came out. So, but those are more conversations, I think, as they mentioned, that they're having with their staff too.
Obviously, most of us are parents here, and one of the hardest things for us is to explain to our daughter why we maybe discipline or do things different with our son. Because every child's different, right? So when you think of it that way, okay, that makes sense. But again, we hear things on social media. There's always, when you can't respond and give the other side of the story, it really puts you in a tough spot.
If you ever hear nothing ever happened to the other kid, you can assume that that is not.
Oh, that's exactly what I assumed, that's always right. No. But with that in mind, is there a way that the 7 steps, I'm not asking us to like spend a ton of time on this, but just from an education standpoint, are there ways that we could look at communicating this?
It's in the handbook.
What?
It's in the handbook.
Yeah, I would say this
The
is.
student handbook that you've read because your kid's in high school.
Oh. I'm not talking about me. No. She's the one to watch out. But no, like in general.
Yeah. So
Not on social media.
Yeah.
Just like looking for those things to kind of
Sure.
get out in front of some of these things, just, you know.
Yeah, and I
It's
think what we're trying to also name tonight is discipline is not synonymous with PBIS, right? They do have separate lanes. Are they related? Of course. Does one negatively impact the other? I don't believe so. So, 2 things is, just to clarify, there are 7 mandatory factors. So before an administrator could issue a suspension or expulsion, it's not check off step 1, step 2, it's looking at what is the child's age, what is the child's previous disciplinary history, what is the child's, does the child have disabilities? So all of these things. And I know that Anne has a goal under human resources that I envision probably will do a lot of coordination with around exactly that point of doing a more robust job of putting out some of that information to our teachers and our parents for them to understand what goes into a disciplinary decision.
Awesome.
Just as a side note, while you were chatting, we still have our SOAR data, and there are parent findings that are very similar to what the teachers have said. And it tells me 2 things. And again, it did say more than there was in 2020. But I also wonder whether there's a little bit of a correlation between the teacher who utilizes it and is effective at it, and so those parents know about it and love it, versus a teacher who maybe isn't quite as comfortable with it and maybe isn't utilizing it the way a parent would want you to see. But I think it's interesting that the numbers are very similar in the parents and the staff,
Yeah.
as far as satisfaction.
Yeah, and I had the same question as Greg. I think you answered it well. I think, and I should know this because I was on your committee. I think it'd be good to look back at the actual, the actual commentary around the SOAR data, just to see 'cause 30% is, 70% sounds good. It's the majority. Most of the teachers think this is great, but what's the 30%? So maybe we can find some of that in actual narrative of the data.
If you look at deeper into the data, even 5% strongly disagree.
Sure.
So there's some, you'll kind of look at, it's not to say.
Answer.
There's no neutral.
Okay, so it's probably better than it sounds, is
Yeah.
my take.
But it doesn't mean we can't improve and
Sure.
dig into
Yeah.
it deeper and ask more questions.
And then the other question,
Nope, go ahead.
the other question I had was, how do we measure that intervention effectiveness? I think you touched on that already, so thank you.
Yeah. On the first, it is our goal that every building has a conversation with their staff around the data, and we did our best as a committee looking at those comments around PBIS and trying to understand the why. But that's only a guess, right? So we want to try to go back to the teachers and close that feedback loop. And then our goal is as a committee to look at what do those conversations sound like across the district, and is there anything we can do to respond?
Yeah, because some of it could just be lack of understanding.
Yes.
Some of the neutral responses could be, maybe they don't understand it well or something. So if there's a way we can shore that up.
Sure.
I was just gonna echo Greg's point and your point that, and I see it's a goal that we aspire to, right? I don't know if we'll ever get to 100%. It's always a journey, something, but to hand that out as a goal, we talked about that for years as a district, consistency across buildings, recognizing at the same time that there'll be some differences amongst buildings, due to variables that we can't control. But to have that as a goal, to keep us aligned and so forth, I think it's good. One question, I know we've talked about this, but refresh my memory, is any of the PBIS activity at risk due to COVID funding changes? We talked about it, I just.
So we talked a little bit about it at our last, when we went through the budget hearing and so forth.
Yeah.
We are evaluating all of our programs. I can tell you that, we don't know what's gonna happen in the state budget.
Yeah.
but next year, we feel very, very confident of where we are with all of our programs that we have with ESSER funds, and federal dollars and state dollars. The year after that, we're gonna continue to evaluate, and that's everything, but I would not, this program, is not going anywhere. It's just, it's been too productive in our classrooms and our staff, and we've had to fine tune it like anything else. And not to say anything else is going away, but we have to evaluate everything, and that, if you remember, if you recall, I know several of you were here, but this started with 2 people. Ross was sitting in the back and Heather Stauffer, and they were doing the whole district and split, and it was, they were hitting out of the park, but the park was too big. So now, we now have the opportunity to have it every year, and I think if you ask our building principals, they would go kicking and screaming before we lost our special facilities. So, that's a roundabout way of saying, I don't think so, but we have to do it.
Thank you, everyone.
Are there any other questions?
Very good.
Important work, thank you very much.
Excellent update and very important work. All right, moving on, we have our Sex Education Advisory Board update.
I've asked Amy to give a quick update regarding this, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you. Regarding Sex Ed Advisory, the board, review kind of where we are, and maybe an exciting update that I just wanted to share also regarding that.
Absolutely. So if you can pass those around, Pat. I'd like to give an update on a couple of things. One would be a vision for putting a lot of information around our reproductive health programming on a website. That conversation started at the Sex Ed Advisory Board table in September, based on some kind of work that I was doing with the co-chair of the Sex Ed Advisory Board, Chris Marsh, who was unable to be here this evening to help me with this report. So he wanted me to apologize for his absence, but he was unable to attend. So what you'll see in front of you is a draft list, if you will, of all of the items that we would like to place on the website. Really develop our own page under curriculum and instruction that is going to speak to really all of our reproductive health programs. So there's some general Sex Ed Advisory Board, so including the list of volunteers who serve on our Sex Ed Advisory Board, really that process for how that membership was developed, which I have shared with you in the past, so putting that out there. A summary of all the legal obligations and best practices, as well as the bylaws of the Sex Ed Advisory Board, which this board has also approved in the past. And then moving into really kind of the ongoing work of the Sex Ed Advisory Board each year, so including minutes, documents, and agendas, and what that yearly calendar looks like, so that people are fully aware of when the meetings are, if they want to join. We do post them on the website prior to, which is part of our bylaws. We're working on developing an FAQ, and Stephanie Fast has been working to solidify what some other surrounding district websites look like in order to gain oh, that's a good idea, we hadn't thought around that. And then really then launching into data, so that's another section that we envision putting on our website, both including the MDE survey that has been done in our district both prior to me arriving, so in 2018, in the spring, that was that MDE survey that was completed, and then again last year in 2023, and then really showing what that data looks like. So not only sharing the survey, but what does that data look like? That's the data that you reviewed last spring, and then our Sex Ed Advisory Board reviewed on December 4th, and now we're looking at really developing, instead of just putting random things on the website that could create a lot more confusion, we want to really ensure that if we're going to begin putting things on the website, we have a clear picture of what is our programming, to avoid a lot of calls to buildings and calls to my office and calls to teachers and calls to, right, like how do we put as much on there? And as you know, that takes time to do that well, and so really spending some time to do that from this perspective and wanting to update you here this evening. So the other piece of data that actually came up at our Sex Ed Advisory Board meeting in September is really around our
both two parts to the Ottawa County Youth Assessment Survey. So we have been giving the Youth Assessment Survey since 2015 here in Hudsonville, along with the opt-in for the reproductive health questions. So that survey is done every 2 years. So it was done in 15 and 17 and 19 and 21 and then again this fall. And so there's two parts to that. One is we can put Ottawa County data on our website. The piece that the Sex Ed Advisory Board feels pretty strongly about is also putting Hudsonville specific data out there on the website. Like if that's data that we're using to guide our programming, let's put that out there for everybody to see. And so that is something that we may kind of ask you to weigh in on as well, because that can sometimes make districts, I think, maybe feel a little vulnerable when you think about some of the risk behaviors that are shared. I think overall, our Sex Ed Advisory Board really feels, again, two parts. One, because we see the trend data from 2015 to now, and the consistent connection between overall overall Ottawa County responses on the Youth Assessment Survey and Hudsonville students in particular being very parallel statistically speaking, that's important data that we're paying attention to drive programming, and so it just makes sense to put that out there. Then moving into the teaching and learning portion, if you flip to the back side, some of those pieces will include both the program goals and objectives for elementary, middle school, high school, and then kind of an overview of all of the opt-out procedures. So again, trying to put everything in one spot so that when people start to have questions, they can find what they need in a very comprehensive way.
I like it.
So when is the goal to have this available?
Well, we're hoping in February. I think that there's a team of us that have been working on it internally. As you can see, there's lots of information there. I'd be curious to know if you see anything that you're curious about, like what about this or what about that? We did discuss it again at the December 4th Sex Ed Advisory Board meeting for a similar conversation, right? Like what are we missing? What does it seem like could be added? Knowing we can add anything at any time as well, but just trying to really get out of the gate with a well thought out comprehensive page.
This also gives an opportunity, if there is information we need to share, we can put it there and send a letter home and say, here's a link to where you can find it versus here's an attachment, all of that. Getting it out there for everybody to read.
There's been a fair amount of conversation as well about what do we put on the website from here's the full curriculum, and so the Sex Ed Advisory Board I think is going to continue to have some conversation about that, like what do we put out there. I think that some general sense from teachers and administrators is they really feel, so for example at the middle school prior to in our 7th grade health class, actually at the beginning of the 7th grade health class, the teacher shares a syllabus that kind of details some of the content within that, within the course, and then the opt-out for that particular portion, which is the reproductive health portion. And staff and administrators feel, they also have, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked in my mind, they also have an opportunity for parents to come in. It's a parent night to come in and ask questions and see the materials, etc. And they still feel there's tremendous value in a conversation. And so I think that that's something that we'll just have to continue to weigh. We don't have a lot of students opting out. I just looked at first semester data at the middle school and high school. Let me be very clear because I know how we all appreciate data, and I have that written down. The first trimester opt-out for this year, we had 1 out of 185 students at the middle school level, so 99.5% of our students participated. And then we had 3 out of 175 students in trimester 1 at the high school opt-out, so that's 98.3% of our students participated and opted to have their student participate. So, you know, we'll continue to kind of navigate what that might look like. Some pieces might be really easy to add on there, for example, a video, which I'll get to in a moment, for review, but then other things like a binder, that might be really tricky to work through, but certainly open to continuing that dialogue as we move forward.
How quickly do we get the data? So you said they did do the surveys in the fall. How quickly do the districts and get the data from that survey?
From the youth assessment survey, just to be clear. So we just actually got an invitation today, March 14th, I believe, that Ottawa County will release that data, and we'll get our individual school data that day as well.
Would be interesting, as part of the data you're getting on the county, do all of the schools have the opt-out provision from the survey? That is something that would also be across the board, like, okay, Hudsonville had 1% of their students opt out of even taking a survey, because obviously that has an impact. Is that at all part of?
That's a good question. I'm wondering that makes me wonder about the Ottawa County Youth Assessment Survey website to see if that data is shared there. I think the specific data for each individual school is not shared publicly. That's up for us as a district to decide whether we want to share that or not. I'm not sure about participation rates though.
As a middle school principal, I don't remember ever having to report that anywhere.
Yeah.
The only thing we
So
would
I
have
think
is
so.
the number that participated, and it could be because others opt out, it could be others were sick, it could be that people
Sure.
didn't show up, or people didn't take it. It was a voluntary thing, and sometimes, to your point, if we don't get data from everybody, we don't know if the data is representative of our, but we know because of volume,
Right.
it is representative of the
Percentage
work we're
change
doing.
would be
Yeah.
very small.
Yes.
Couple other comments, very appreciative of the legal obligations, and best practices, because time and again, I think it's important for us to remind our community that sometimes there may not be things that they particularly like, but we also have our obligations to follow the law.
Sure.
And it's easy then to say, go to the website, here's the statute, call your legislator if you're not happy with what's said. So I appreciate definitely having that information on there so that they can read for themselves that there are certain things that we're required to do if we provide sex education. And then with respect to detailed curriculum, I agree there's no reason to hide anything, but I also think those minor tweakings of, this was the handouts we're doing, well then as a year progresses, it's like, oh wow, we didn't have time to do that handout. You know, if you get too specific, then those small things that change, can produce a lot of work for someone to constantly be going back into that website and making sure you remove, you know, something that may have been tweaked. So that's
Yeah.
just kind of my opinion on that. I like a little bit more of the summary idea, since the parents themselves are getting the specific detail.
That's helpful, thank you.
I just appreciate the work that's gone into this, not just this, but historically, because sex ed is reproductive health education, can be a sensitive subject. And to hear the rigor that you're putting into it, realizing only like 4 students have opted out, so obviously that tells us that 99% of the parents are fine with it. The concern that you have for that roughly 1% is appreciated, to give them that transparency, give them the opportunity to opt out, so. thank
Yeah,
you for that.
and I think that just, I guess, aligns with some of the other values that we've had in other ways, right? We want to partner with families, we want to show up and give them the information that they need to make the best decision for their own individual child. And that is part of the legal statute as well, is allowing parents to opt out. So here's the information and you have every right to opt out, so.
Yeah, I agree with Dawn about keeping the website, maybe even to just agenda topics or topics of discussion and not getting so specific, because content will change. And just providing individuals with the opportunity to come and read new material.
Sure,
I just
okay,
think
that's
it's a lot
helpful.
to update if you're changing curriculum, that's a lot of work.
I think the one piece that I do want to be clear on is that the reproductive health curriculum, we've been very tight on saying this is the board approved curriculum, because we do want to be clear that middle school students in 7th grade at Riley are going to be getting the same exact content as the 7th graders at Baldwin. And so this is a curricular area that is a bit different, in my opinion, than math or reading or science, right? Because those handouts change, and now I'm going to use this new article because this new article is more pertinent and more engaging for the students, or it has updated data. I think the piece that we've tried to stay very tight on is that if you're teaching it in 7th grade, this is the board approved curriculum, and you will teach it in its entirety. So I appreciate the thinking around maybe a reason to consider not putting it there. I do wonder about the timing piece, right? Because teachers, goodness, look how many snow days we've had, and teachers are adjusting, so I can see that thinking as well, like if for some reason there's something posted on the website and because I had to cut the portion of my 7th grade reproductive health instruction a little short, maybe an activity was taken out. So I'm just grappling with all of that, but I do want to be clear that we've tried to be very tight with that content because of the sensitive nature of it. We want to be clear with parents. So I'll continue to think through some of that and certainly with our sex ed advisory board.
Sorry if we've covered this already, but how was the opt-out process communicated to parents?
Yeah, so within, let me find some details here for you. So the from an elementary perspective, they have puberty that's taught in 4th and 5th grade and HIV that's taught in 5th grade. And that information is sent home. That's typically done in the spring. We are looking at changing that deadline or that timeline a little bit for our 4th graders because of puberty and when it's starting to hit. So we're thinking of doing that before winter break instead of more of that spring break time period. So at the elementary, it's an opt-out process, so that information goes home directly from the teachers who are teaching that, and it gives them the details of when we'll be doing it, and then they have the opportunity to opt their child out. The building principals also usually put it in their newsletter, like, hey, don't forget, this is the rough timeline that we're going to be doing that. From a middle school perspective, that's an opt-in, where they are sent home an entire 7th grade health syllabus, of which then a portion of that kind of details out some of the content within the 7th grade reproductive health, and then that opt-in form is there. If they don't get them back, our teachers are very good about making sure that that opt-in form is there.
So the data you shared was like 99.5%, so 95.5 actually had to opt in.
Correct.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and teachers do a great job of like, they
Chasing
have
that.
to get something even in an email and writing to say that your child can participate in
Yeah.
order to have them participate in
That's-
the lesson.
Okay, that's really
You'll
good
get
to
it
know.
soon enough.
Yeah.
7th grade will be here before you know it. I'll send you the videos. Then you can
Start
prep at
preparing
home.
myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Do what I did, give them to my
Thanks
wife.
for that.
Yeah. I think so, and we did have an opportunity
I
to follow up
responded to your email
as well.
this afternoon. We had a lot going on today.
I've been having trouble with my emails. I don't get them all.
Yeah, you sent it at like 4 o'clock today. It
Yeah.
says answers.
I haven't been on my computer since then,
Oh.
so I'll check that later. Okay, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. The other update under the umbrella of Sex Ed Advisory Board is that we do have a request that follows. So I have those 2 timelines really for course approvals, which we just went through on Thursday evening. And then I also have timelines for when I will be coming for recommendations for adoption of curriculum or textbooks. And so that timeline looks like February 26th, our next work session is when I'll be bringing information to you around math. I talked to you a little bit about elementary math. There is a high school textbook update as well. And the Sex Ed Advisory Board is requesting an updated video for our 5th grade puberty. Same standards, same content, but just moving out of the 80s and moving into the 2000s.
It's not a VHS tape, the new version.
Yeah, so, yeah. So the Sex Ed Advisory Board had an opportunity to review the video and discuss the video at the December 4th meeting and moved forward with a formal recommendation and approval to recommend that to you. And so we're working through kind of some of the details.
So here's the challenge. We'll have to have 2 public hearings for any change to the curriculum. Traditionally, because of the content, we want to make sure the board has a chance to view the old video, but we have to get licensing for you to view the new video before we use it. So we're working on getting the licensing. If this works out, the timing, we'd like to share it with the board a week before our next work session. And we'd have a public hearing at the end of that work session. We wouldn't be showing the video at the work session. It's about 20 minutes for
Boys,
boys,
25 minutes for
20
girls.
For girls, so it's 45 minutes. We'll share that with the board. You can watch in And Jerome, you can watch it multiple times if you want. Share it with your kids, but then, and then at our next board meeting in March, we would then have the, public hearing prior to the meeting, and then ask for board approval at that point. Again, it's, I'm overgeneralizing, that's going from a VHS to an online, but it is updating the video, as you, if you might remember, it's the same video that I had in 5th grade.
Well, why?
No, it literally is, I
It
promise
is,
you.
it is, because 1980,
Yeah,
and I was in,
I'm not kidding.
4th grade.
I think I'm over exaggerating, but it is
No.
very old and outdated, the content isn't necessarily different, and so, but
It's a little bit
follow the
shorter than,
process.
it does short, it goes from 30 minutes down to 25, and it cuts what, 8 minutes down to 2 minutes. We like to share those with the board, we're still working on licensing, we literally tried to finalize the timeline about a half hour before this meeting started, because, we have to make sure we have
The
those
two public
hearings.
hearings, because it's reproductive health content.
And there'll be at least a week apart between the two.
So the video is one thing, and then the curriculum.
Curriculum does not change,
Curriculum
just
doesn't
the
change,
video.
just the video.
They're using a different video we'd like to share with the board, because it's part of that curriculum.
Okay.
We'll
Yep.
have to have board approval. It's considered a material that is changed for the sex ed curriculum, so.
Any other questions on sex ed?
Can you put those dates? Can you put those dates in our board?
Could you
Yeah, the
rephrase
work
that
session,
question?
yeah. You heard it.
Yes,
We'll
the
get to
timeline for the video,
Yeah, just,
Andrew.
We'll get-
Absolutely.
We just tried to finalize them today.
And as soon as I can get the license opened back up so that we can have continued access, because it is a purchase, so then you have to have that online access. So I'll work on some timelines for board briefs, so that's clear,
Okay, yeah.
and,
So I can put it on my calendar.
yeah, set aside time to watch some videos. You got it.
This is really good, thanks. Amy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, there's a whole team of us who've been working on
Thank
it.
you, appreciate it.
Thank you for the update. All right, moving on, we have our high school science courses review.
I am going to pass around an updated, my sincere apologies on this. So the dates, the science, in your packet, let me slow down, in your packet, there are science courses listed. However, the dates of previous course approvals were omitted. So by way of reminder, we were able to find some, diving through old board minutes, etc., we were able to find some dates. So this paper copy includes some dates of previous approvals. The courses that don't have a date are going to be the ones that then will ask for formal approval at the next board meeting, based on our discussion here this evening.
So if you recall, our goal is to try to get all of our courses officially approved with dates. Not all of them have dates, so in your packet, they were all blank, but a lot of these already had been approved. So now, we'll be asking at the next board meeting for approval for ones that don't have a date, so that we can have a record that they've been board approved. And I think next is that,
I think so.
or maybe that's.
I think we
We
already
have two
did
more
that.
areas to cover.
I think we did
And the
that.
goal was, when we first brought this, I think we had a lot, and we broke them up by elementary we've done, middle school's done, and now we're at the high school going through content areas and get them approved.
So when we look at this, is there any requirement that they're reviewed every, because there's one on here, chemistry 2 from 1973, that's 50 years ago.
So this is just for a course, not the content of the
textbook.
course. I know, and we always have
Textbook
to,
approval and course approval, these are course approvals,
Okay.
that we teach chemistry.
That we will teach chemistry.
Correct.
and the standards are linked at the top, right? So that's where you would also then find, okay, what is the content taught within that course? Those standards would then fall within the science courses listed here.
And the standards continue to evolve when the state takes on reviewing. Social studies has been a
And
major
science.
overhaul, it's still going on, so then, when that's done, they'll go back to math or science and say, okay, let's revisit the standards to make sure there's nothing new. Traditionally, math doesn't evolve too much. As you can imagine, social studies is been a challenge for the overall state. But us teaching the course, still there.
And these are all, there's, nothing is new here, as I look
Nothing
through the
new.
list, everything is the same.
Yep, nothing. is-
Anything new would have been brought to the
Sure.
board in the past
Whatever.
6 years.
Yep.
These are ones that we say before us, we wanna make sure we have.
With the exception, I suppose, of AP Bio, that's been since, that was 2022.
Right,
That was approved.
but that went through the process with the
Right.
board, visiting, reading.
How many students are looking at taking botany?
We have a lot,
Really?
we have, yeah, I'm
Like every.
reviewing some of those applications right now, and a lot of our students are.
Yeah, there's a couple sections of it.
I know that the point of this is course approval, and, again, it's good we do this, because we never did this in the past, so it's good we do this now. So my question is not related to that. Oh, I see.
Not even remotely related?
Well, it's remotely
Going back to-
related, but my mind goes to AP, as we talked about before, so I don't know who would wanna be a geologist, but, do we have AP geology? Do we have AP geology on the horizon?
I don't know if it, I don't know if it exists.
I don't know if it exists
I
either.
don't know if it's an AP
If
offer.
it's an AP offer, okay.
Yeah, so we continue to
Same, I'm
evaluate
sorry,
AP.
but same with anatomy phys, is that an AP offer?
I don't know, I can look, there's, not everything is offered as AP.
Okay.
IB does, right?
IB does.
Yeah, but AP does not.
And
Just curious.
on geology, since you brought it up. The exam that Chris Bullheis gives,
Yeah.
it does allow credits at, what, 20 different universities?
Yeah.
So it's not an AP class, it's not but they take Grand Valley's geology exam,
Okay.
and most colleges and universities in Michigan take that as credit for a college level.
Science is like the closest one
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
So to your original question, I believe though, our teachers continue to evaluate what offerings in their content areas, and we'll be asking, can we, and it takes time to get an AP course through, but, we continue to add when there's interest and a capable staff member that's willing to
We
do
talked
it.
about that last time, how it prompts and so forth, so, again, I was just curious if you saw anything on the horizon, okay.
The other interesting thing that I would mention is that College Board is now putting out a potential for success in an AP course report to parents and students, that I think might hold some merit in being able to identify more students. So based on some of their preliminary scores on PSAT, they're putting out, gosh, Amy Taylor, you could be a good candidate for some AP courses. So we'll continue to learn more about that too. That's just kind of hot off the presses this fall, but that might have some legs with continuing to further identify students who may be good candidates.
Not to get too sidetracked, but you bring up a really interesting point. What other courses do we have that our educators have created a curriculum and an exam that gets kids college credit? I mean, is that a common thing, or is that like?
It's not common, for universities. I would certainly say Mr. Chris Bullheis is,
The real Mr. Bullheis?
well, you know what I mean, he's got it now.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's really cool.
Most content areas lead into the AP world, right? Your AP Calc, AB, BC, those kind of things. AP Stats, those are things that they really strive for, but, Chris is a, got a lot.
That's awesome.
Our business permit has matriculation theory.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool.
Any other questions on the high school science courses?
What also, I'm sorry, Doctor, but what also struck me is when you go into the state standards and you read through those, holy characters a lot there. And this is just science, I mean, that's not math, so, we expect a lot of our teachers and.
They do a lot of work aligning curriculum to standards and teaching to them too. This will come to the board for approval in,
February 8th, yeah.
We'll have to first read a second this year for approval, right? Any more questions on high school science? Okay, next up we have our superintendent goals, and just to provide some context for our discussion as we move forward. It's been a couple months, so I need everyone to kind of put their thinking caps back on. So back in November, after consulting with Jay Bennett at the NASB, I sent everyone an email sharing the annual evaluation process cycle that will be used following the NASB guidelines. So we were very fortunate to have Jay Bennett come and to help facilitate Dr. Vanderjack's evaluation in November. And on the evaluation instrument that Jay distributed to all the board members and Dr. Vanderjack the day after on November 28th, next steps are provided in Appendix E and Appendix F. And those steps have been confirmed with Jay. So one thing that is still unclear from the time that we did our evaluation, and I actually checked with Jay today, is the status of the new superintendent evaluation tool. Jay mentioned they are working on a new superintendent evaluation tool. He said he didn't know if it would be required that all superintendents are reevaluated with this new tool. No decision has been made yet. Jay does not anticipate a decision being made until spring. So we can't make any decisions in regards to Doug's annual evaluation until there's a decision from the MASB. So Jay indicated to please just follow the current process. So on that email that I sent, if everyone remembers back to November, during the month of January, we would review expectations and develop SMART goals for this calendar year. Then in April, we'll do an informal update, June, a formal discussion, August, another informal update, and then in November, we will do an evaluation if it is necessary. So today, we need to develop 2 to 3 SMART goals. So when developing these goals, all board members and Dr. Vanderjagt should be involved in the process per MASB. To help guide goal development, Jay shared in November that the goals should not already be part of the strategic plan or on the evaluation instrument. And when I was talking to him today, I did verify that as well. So the summary of the conversation that Jay recorded based on Dr. Vanderjagt's evaluation on November 27th, and that he emailed to all board members on November 28th, he said that could be used to help guide goal development. Again, Jay said no more than 2 to 3 SMART goals because otherwise it will become burdensome. And we don't want that to be like that for Dr. Vanderjagt. We don't want this to be a burdensome process. So we need to ask, what will we see next year toward the accomplishment of this and what we don't see now? So as I turn it over to Dr. Vanderjagt to review the goals he has established, and he has provided them all for us. For each goal, we need to first determine if it's covered in either the strategic plan or on the evaluation instrument. If it is, we can remove it. Then we need to determine what would we like to see that we are currently not seeing. And again, we're just developing goals. Dr. Vanderjagt, as you guys all know, he's type A, so he has gone ahead and fully developed everything, kind of putting the cart before the horse. But tonight, we're just gonna develop goals that we will collaboratively develop, that we will all mutually agree upon per NASB. And then next steps for Dr. Vanderjagt then will to develop his action plan once we have the 2 to 3 goals finalized. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Vanderjagt and we can go through the staff document. And he also sent it to board members yesterday. And we can talk about each goal and we can go from there. But goal is 2 to 3.
So a point of question of clarification. So was Jay saying that the board is creating 2 to 3 goals for Doug to accomplish? Or is this about the superintendent creating goals for himself, or is both?
No, so Jay had said he shouldn't have additional goals. That Doug shouldn't have like personal goals, because that's too much. So, if you look at Appendix F and Appendix E, which I talked to Jay about again today, when establishing performance goals, the following guidelines should be considered. Involve all board members and superintendent. So Jay stressed it should be a mutually agreed upon process, and it should involve all of us. It shouldn't just be me as president, or Nick as vice president, or Dr. Vanderjagt. It should be all of us. And what do we want to see moving forward that we're not seeing now? And not a lot. Jay said no more than 2 to 3. So Jay said it would be helpful, something for us to think about is an email that he sent us on things that he saw from the conversation that we had. Those are things that we could use to help develop some SMART goals.
And I appreciate that overview and understand Jay's perspective and comments, having been down this path a couple of times with Jay. And sometimes you have to step back and go, okay, what do we have as a superintendent? I mean, when a company hires a CEO, they hire that CEO to because that CEO fits the needs of the organization, it's driving the organization in the right direction, and so forth. When a university hires a president, that they're going, okay, president, we are entrusting you to lead this organization, and it's the same with the superintendent. We're entrusting you to lead this organization, and part of that is we expect you to see where there may be gaps in the organization, where there may be areas for improvement, and where there may be areas that we need to, that you say, okay, I've got to put more emphasis, I've got to drive some more activity here or here. As a board, as a functioning board, again, be it a school board, or a board of directors, or a church board, or whatever, again, I know y'all got my email, but we have to think about governance. And we entrust this individual to say, your job is to drive the district forward. Your job is to run the district and to drive it forward. And so what I expect from you, and I expect it from individuals who work for me as an executive, I expect it from others, I want you to bring the goals to me based on the gaps that you see in the organization. And as a board, or as your supervisor, I want to review those goals and say, I see a gap here, I see a gap there, but directionally, you're leading the district in the right direction. So I do appreciate and respect Jay's comments. I've had similar conversations with him, but he's offering a slice and a perspective. And you also have to remember that he's talking about every district in the state, all 581 districts in the state of Michigan, some of which have never done a goal for a superintendent, some of which have been down like us with a superintendent that's done this with large districts like Rockford in the past, some of which have said, we know how to do this, we know how to move this. So remember, Jay's talking about the 200 student district up in the western UP that's never done a goal. And sharing perspective on here's how you get started, here's what you do. But in the case of a district, a high-performing district, which we are, with a high-performing superintendent that has done this, we have to take that into account as well. So, and again, I come back to the strategic governance and
I
what it
appreciate
was.
that perspective, Ken. I've had a lot of conversations with Jay, and this is the MASB. I mean, we use the MASB tool, research-based. They have a very established process on what we should be doing.
Right, and I'm not countering the process. I'm not saying the process is wrong. I agree with you. My point is that that tool is developed for, again, a 200-kid district that has never done goals. And it also forms we're a couple notches above that in terms of our performance, in terms of what we do and what we expect from our superintendent and our superintendent staff, quite frankly. So, and again, we can talk about it. I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about it. I'm not saying we shouldn't debate what I put out there or Doug's put, whatever. That's not my point. But think more broadly in terms of where we're at with the district versus where West Ogeevic High School is in Western UP. We're in a different place. On the MASB Foundation, still taking the same path, but going a little higher. And I'll be honest, I don't have an issue with saying, Doug, you've got 5 goals. Because you can do 5 goals, one of which is construction, monitor construction. It's the same thing we're doing, but it's so crucial to the district that you've got to keep an eye on construction and let us know if something's going to be late. So it's not like a new goal, but it's so critical, you got to keep an eye on that one part. So I respect MASPs, again, I appreciate you reiterating that, but think about us as building on that foundation and 2 steps higher than that. That's the point I try to make.
That's a fair point. And like we've all, in different settings have done reviews. We've been, the recipient of the review. Also, a lot of us have led reviews. And I always look at more aspirationally too. Like to your point, I think we do a lot of things really well. I would want to be like, well, what's that stretch goal? What beyond the SOAR goals, beyond all the things that Dr. Vanderdyk does really well? What's the next thing? Like, what could we do more? And then I think having the conversation as a board, well, what can we do to support that goal? Because that falls on us too. I mean, that's where our role comes in is, what resources do you need to do this? And I shouldn't have to do it alone type of a thing. That's I always have liked to hear that personally when I've been having my review is, hey, well, how can I help? That, so that's the way I look at it.
Just a technical comment, I did not get your email today, Ken, which is kind of weird. No, I think you had me on, I did not get, I'll talk to the IT department tomorrow about it. I did not get yours, but I got your comment about his email, so.
Okay.
So I didn't know what you were talking about, but anyway, to the discussion now, I'm not sure, Ken, how you want us to proceed differing from what Barbara suggested. She suggested that we collaborate here and come up with 3 goals. The only difference I could see was you were thinking with 5 would be okay.
No, I think Barb has established what we wanna do.
Okay.
And I think we follow Barb's lead in this. Again, my advice to the board is that, number one, we don't get hung up on 2 or 3. We're a high-performing district, a high-performing superintendent, a high-performing team. Let's not get too hung up on that, number one. Now, if it ends up being 3, I don't care, but he sets the goal, the superintendent sets the goals. And he may say, I want 4. And our job as a board to go, okay, well, those all fit directionally with where the district needs to go, so it's 4. And back to Nick's point, then we support, and we evaluate and so on. And the process that Dr. Hooper laid out in terms of review, I think is spot on. I commend you for laying that out. So I'm saying we stick with that, we do that. The other thing I would suggest is that, again, with a CEO of a company, or the superintendent of a district, or the lead pastor in a church, I expect them to come to me, and I would encourage the board to think about it this way, to come to me with, where do you see the needs in terms of driving the organization forward? And I wanna review what you see, and then I wanna give input, say, I think we got a gap here or there, but by and large, you're driving the district in the right way, or the church, or the whatever. And, but how do we support you in doing that? So I'm not disagreeing with what Barb's doing. I'm taking exception to, I don't think we get hung up on 2 or 3, and I don't think we let it go through and talk about what he's thinking. And
maybe if I
support.
talk through them, it'll help give some clarity
Yeah,
as
I'll
to
do
the
that.
why. And I'm not trying to, it's a great conversation. So,
Can I just make one follow-up comment too as well? And I think I know where you're looking at it from, Barb, because at the end of the evaluation, we did talk about some things that we might want Doug to look at, and some areas that may be of improvement. And from what I see, a couple of those address those things that we had talked about. And if there were other ones, maybe this is the opportunity, once Doug goes through his list, we could talk about it. So I understand what you're saying based on our time of evaluation, that there were some things that we wanted to possibly look at. And I think that's a little bit of the struggle. It's like, we may as a board have some things that we are saying, hey, this is an area where we would like to improve. But then also allowing Doug to make goals for himself to go above and beyond expectations of where we are currently.
Yeah, and I think it's important, as goals were developed last year, a goal changed mid-year, and the board wasn't informed. So goal 2 was replaced, and we had a different goal 2, but we never had an evaluation of that goal. So,
And again, I commend your discipline to the process of reviewing and the dates and so forth, so. Yeah.
Well, we never did this at all last year. We just didn't do it. You know, I mean, when I had and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, we just didn't do it. And so when I took the course in October and it says, this is what happens in January, this is what should happen in April, this is what, I'm thinking, in fact, I called Nick right afterwards and I said, did I miss something here? So we didn't do that, okay? And this year we're going to do it. The second thing is that I have to say, and just from a process standpoint, I agree with you 100%, Ken. We're not talking about a 200 student district in the UP. The goals that I have to suggest here are specifically meant for Hudsonville and for Dr. Vanderjack, specifically. And I've got some reasons why that I have those. So you're right, I don't want anything out here. I want something that's targeted right for what we need. Also, when I'm evaluating, and all of us have been on both evaluated and evaluating. And certainly when you have a high-performing individual like we have here, you want input from them as to what they think is important. But as a board member, there's only so many things that we do. And one of them is that we direct the superintendent, not any other employee, the superintendent. This is a way that we have to do that within the process, within the SMART goal, so that everybody knows and understands exactly what we're talking about. So I don't see anything, outside of what Jay's talking about, or what we want to do here. And I think it's a very practical and a very important way to proceed, so.
Yeah, let's proceed.
Yeah, so I took the feedback from Jay Bennett in his email to make sure I included some of the things that impacted the district. And there are also some things that maybe may not be on the radar of the board that I think we need to spend some time on. So I'll start with my first goal. Is really about diving deeper into the data. Those that were on the board prior to 2020 will remember we were in this room doing a deep dive into data and looking at exactly what standards and where we were hitting the standards at certain grade levels and where we may not. I'm not going to say we got away from that, but a lot has happened since that time. We've spent quite a bit of time this school year starting to look at what that data truly looks like, and it's not just about making sure that we're high performing. It's really diving deep into content areas. We talked about the factors that are impacting our assessment scores, and particularly the impact that AI is having on on not just student performance, but measuring the essential standards. So that is a goal number one, that would be really continue that dive into it this school year. And the reason why it's a calendar year is because we take an assessment in the spring, we don't get the data until the fall to find out how we're doing. So to me, that is something, and I don't care if you cross off the goal, we're still gonna work on it. And it's with so many other things. I mean, increasing our marching band numbers is a goal, but I didn't put that on here. We had a presentation tonight. The budget planning and talking about what are we gonna do with our ESSER funds. That's a goal that we're gonna work on to make sure we have some good, but that's not on here to discuss. The PBIS work that's taking place, we have goals and aspirations to make that a little bit more solid, if you will. That's on there. We talked about books in the past. We continue to evaluate that. That's not on here. I'm looking at big picture items that drive the district forward, that make us continue to make us a destination district. So that would be one of them.
So is that covered under the SOAR? So that would be my question, because a lot of the things you're referencing, I see in our SOAR.
I did not feel that was in our SOAR strategic plan. None of these, I didn't think any of these were. You could probably lean towards construction as to district growth might be, but this is specific to our 2019 bond. That's a goal a little bit later on here. So I did not feel that. I think these can run in parallel with our strategic plan. I think our strategic plan is derived from different components that I think are, particularly our central office, take the lead on and do an amazing job with. But if there's any goal related to the strategic plan, would be the importance of us relaying to the board what items from the strategic plan we are working on and provide that feedback to the board. But no, I did not feel like it was on.
Yeah, that's, no, go ahead. I was gonna say, I mean, this, again, this is the first time we followed this process to find this, so there's gonna be a little learning here, I think, with this. Yeah, where do you draw the line of, I'm already gonna be doing all of these things, whether I put it in here or not? So,
There's certain items that I feel that we're gonna do regardless. We do that, that's how we function, right? As humans, that's how we function. We try to be better than we were yesterday. But I think these are in my opinion, five driving forces that if somebody said, what are you working on? These are things that as a superintendent, I would help drive. Obviously I'm not gonna do this alone. Working with the curriculum department is extremely important for that. But it's also something that I feel one of the most important things that we do in this district is curriculum. And we have to focus on how our students are performing.
Ken's email today, I'm sorry, Ken.
No, you
go
go.
faster than the trigger, man. Ken's email is helpful this afternoon on this particular one for me, because at first blush, I'm like, I kind of feel like, again, you're already doing these things, but the context you put it in was helpful, and then just hearing things that, from different grade level teachers about the curriculum and what they like about it and what they don't like. You're gonna get that with anything, I'm sure. To know that it's a high priority of continuing to evaluate the effectiveness, and that's fair. To me,
We
that's
have
a really high
evolved,
standard.
we have evolved so fast when it went to one-to-one during COVID. We didn't have a chance to step back and look at our students' performance on assessments. Is it about anxiety? Is it about familiarity with the device they're using? Or is it about readability? Or is it about content? And we need to get to the point that we can focus it to the content so that we know the kids can read it. We know the kids aren't using somebody else's device that they're not sure if the keys stick or they don't stick or how the mouse pad works. We need to remove that noise to find out specifically content, and then we can identify the grade levels, and then we can also look at cohorts to say, is it a 4th grade cohort as they're moving through, or is it 4th grade? Is it a transition to the 5-6 building? Having the 5-6 building added a whole different level of transition for us. We need to focus on how our kids are performing.
We didn't discuss this Thursday, I think it was at work, but there was a study that came out of Europe recently looking at reading retention on screens versus in an actual book. That was not here, was it?
No.
And the retention rate is much lower when they read it on a screen versus out of a real book. Yeah, shocking, right? And I'm looking at my son, who is a smart kid, but he does not do well on the tests that are on the computer. So it's like, yeah, evaluating, and computers aren't going away.
What was the rate of difference?
I can't remember the magnitude, but it was just interesting. Like, okay, I'm seeing that in my own home and knowing the one-to-one and all that. Okay,
So keep it exploring.
Yeah, you should. So as it relates to assessment data, is that quick enough? So my understanding is teachers are not weighted, their evaluations are not weighted as highly in the future on assessment data as,
That's correct.
right? So do we need to take that into consideration with this goal or anything you're doing
So
specifically?
we'll talk more about my evaluation moving forward. I know we have an update from MASB Wednesday at our state meeting. And I'm pretty sure that they've finalized the superintendent evaluation process.
Okay.
Just not the tool as
Sure.
Dr. Hooper alluded to. So, because the process won't have 4 categories, it'll have 3.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So that changes the document, because you can't have a rubric for 4 when there's only 3
Sure.
choices. on
I'm
it.
just,
So-
I'm just thinking through,
So-
if there are implications for teacher and how teachers are evaluated based on assessment data.
So
Is it fair
teachers will
to
be
also?
evaluated based on assessment data for the building or grade level. Central office and superintendent would be from the district.
Okay,
That's in the language.
thank you.
I'm just gonna go through and then
Yes.
just stop it.
Yep.
Goal number 2, this came out of conversations of my evaluation regarding getting out there and having deeper conversations with the community. And one way to do that, well, there's multiple ways to do it, but one of the best ways to do it is to really spend time with not only the Interschool Advisory Council, which Mr. DeWitt was there last week, we met. I know Mark's been to them before, Dawn's been to them before, I think Greg's been to one. But also getting out into the buildings and into the communities and talking about not only the non-homestead transition, but that's when you find out questions and concerns people have regarding what's taking place in the district. I think when we did our bond issue meeting was at a family's house. I spent about 2 minutes talking about the bond, like, we don't care about that. We wanna talk about X, Y, and Z. And so to me, this is a great way to start building that conversation back, not doing a district town hall, but doing individual meetings throughout the district. Focus really on elementary because those boundaries are different. Forest Groves, I would say population or community area is different than Bowers, is different than Park. So doing that in the community going from there. So this is a goal that helps, number 1, provide information to our community other than just an email or something on our website, but a personal conversation about what does the non-homestead look like, as well as the future of Hudsonville and going from there.
Okay, one quick thing. So under C3 on your rubric, you don't remember what that is, and probably nobody else does either, but we talked about opportunities to bring the board kind of together along along similar sort of, levels of interest, right? In terms of, so the non-homestead discussions, the community engagement around those things. These are your goals, right? But I guess I'll just say if there's an opportunity to bring the board alongside those discussions, I think it would be helpful.
And I think that's where the inter-school advisory, having the board member attend that, and if there are staff meetings that a board member wants to attend, I can get those dates out. Yeah.
I think it's important for the community to see that this board is also supporting you in those things. I think that'll go a long way.
Interesting. I'd love to, get a list of some of the staff meetings again to
Be
be
present, right?
Yeah.
It's always a good, even if you don't say anything,
Yeah.
presence says a lot.
Yeah, no, I'd love to get that list, that'd be great.
The next goal is about diversity and advocacy. We do have goals on our strategic plan and our SOAR plan regarding that. This is specific to getting this plan off the ground. We've been meeting for 2 years now, and Nick, I think you had even mentioned to me that, one of our breakfast meetings, that it's about time we have to do something. So I think that's one of those things that this is specific to an actionable plan. Now, it still has to go board approval, it's gotta go all that, but we've been doing so much work under, I do wanna thank several of our administrators. Mandy's helping lead this work, Amy's at the meetings, just going through and saying, okay, we have a problem of practice that we've agreed on. Now let's try to find, some actionable plans to, get our students and our teachers, support prior to the 7 factors for discipline, if that makes sense, right? We spend so much time reacting to those 7 factors. We have to do something. I know, Barb, we've talked about the Be Nice program. I know we're looking at multiple different programs that still has to go before the board. If you read the last board briefs regarding the survey conversation, we feel, at least I think Greg was in the same group I was in, I think Mark, you were in the other group. But I don't know if Greg can allude to this, but we at least, maybe it's me, but I think we agreed that we have enough data to look at something from a 30,000 foot, to go from there. We don't need to, we had looked at survey data last May, I think, or surveys last May. And I think I understood this, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, slow down. Let's not just rush these surveys out to get them out before the end of the year, but we have enough data, we think, to have this conversation. So this goal is specifically to, all right, we've been doing this work, we owe this to our students and to our staff to get this, to have some actionable plans. So that's that goal specifically. The construction goal, and that was, yes, we're still gonna do this, but it's a big, $140 million bond project that's not complete. Knowing what's taking place at Park Elementary with the renovation changes, knowing what's taking place at Bauer Elementary, not quite done at the high school with the cafeteria, in the school, in the concession stand, and the robotics area that still has to be redesigned. I know Pat's going tomorrow, I think, to look at robotics. Just really keeping the board and keeping the eye that just because the field house is open, we are not done. And this was intentional by saying, we punched out some large ticket items, the connector, we punched out the 5-6 building, and we're gonna punch out the field house, but we're not done. And that was intentional by saying, this is a big responsibility that we wanna make sure our community knows that our board has used their money wisely and followed a process to make sure that we are staying on top of things.
The other thing I might, and maybe there's some language to put in here without getting too specific, but we do have, from a strategic standpoint, and it's like, holy crap, we're still building, but we have to be thinking about the next. And what that entails, what it involves, and I know we're still in the thick of it here, so that's the other thing I kind of tie to this one, Doug, is initial thoughts, just those initial conversations, those initial seeds around what's next, what are the next needs of the district in 20 years, you know?
And I think if you go back to goal 2, I'm gonna find a lot of those, we're gonna have a lot of those conversations, because people will ask. They're gonna ask about a 5-6 building, they're gonna ask about early childhood, they're gonna ask about a second high school, all those conversations that we technically put to rest when we surveyed our community about, do you want a second high school? And it was overwhelmingly no. But we'll see if it comes up again, we have to address it.
Yeah, again, you get my point, that it's construction, that's crucial to,
future.
but also thinking what's next.
Sure.
Pardon me again, but we do have some of the growth in the circles.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true for that. The other thing too is, you know, seeing the buildings and walking into the field house and doing all those things. It's awesome to see what we're doing it for the students, right? This is all for the students. And I'm not saying this needs to be added to the goal here specifically, but it would be really great to see how the investment in these facilities has led to more opportunities for student growth and opportunities for them. I think, because that's why we do what we do, right? That's why we put up a new building. That's why we hire great people to affect our students, obviously. So, does that make sense?
It does. I wrote it up. No, it makes sense. And I think sometimes it's hard to see that because you have a gym with a basketball court, and we've had a basketball court. We do have now a tennis court, which does add opportunities for kids to do that off season. The new weight room and cardio will allow for the rest of those rooms to be now utilized, because right now they're in 2 different rooms. The connector will allow for robotics to be moved into add opportunities. We're looking at curriculum opportunities for drone classes or STEAM classes that can lead into the high school that will lead right into robotics. So those are things that we can
And to communicate those things somehow to the community, I think it's important, because there are people that are like, wow, we sure spent a lot of money on that scoreboard, or, you know, things like, you hear stuff like that. And it's like, well, we don't do these things to walk in and be like, oh, look at this is great. It's like, we're thinking about the kids that get to use it every day. And not only that, but, you know, if I'm someone that's on the fence about taking weight training or something like that, and I see this awesome state-of-the-art facility, I might be more interested in doing it. Like, what do those numbers look like? And I think
just watching the dance competition on Saturday is a great indicator of wow. 37 teams came, and our kids were helping to run it, because you can't participate when you're hosting. They were proud, but they were also like, all right, other kids were like, you know, I might want to do this.
And use of the track, like, think about how many students are gonna be able to run in the weather like this when they otherwise wouldn't be able to. Like, think about the health benefits. We're not gonna track every little detail, but like,
I will say I have had a bunch of people say, so can the community come in and use that track? And I always say, you know, we gotta get all the bugs out and get everything situated, but I do think that's a component of this too, right? It's for the kids, but it's for the community, and continuing to explore ways that we can utilize that for the community, because all that does is generate additional goodwill, because they feel like they can participate in that facility for themselves as well as for the students.
We do need to get
the number 2 here.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
we do need to get everything open in that facility. It's not, and
Right.
I don't know if you saw some of my latest, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
You know, we're getting there. But you know, it has to do with the access to the bathrooms by the pickleball courts at ECC. It has to do with the indoor pickleball markets at the 5-6 building for community use eventually. I mean, it's gonna just take us time.
I mean, you still gotta have somebody that's ultimately responsible when you open it to the community to clean
And
it.
training, and we do not need a bunch of people that believe they are still 24 years old to go lift weights at a different age and get hurt.
That's right.
We don't need that.
I have a story. I have a horror story to share that happened at Rockford my freshman year in high school. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. But however, what I was thinking,
he was part of it, right?
No, I don't know if you were. But anyway, it might be helpful in the next Appleseed or something to have like the indirect effects of these sorts of things. Like, yeah, we built this gym, but now we've got more room for robotics, or maybe, you know, stuff like that. I don't know.
We can, the Appleseed's a little heavy with snow day information this time, but definitely in the future, or even a separate publication that we send out.
I think
here's
it's
a
more for the
construction
community.
update, and here's we have, the blog is on our website that gives a lot of information, but we can put together a complete separate, doesn't have to be Appleseed, you can just have a construction update that it talks about not only the other opportunities, but also talks about the public use of facilities too, and what that timeline looks like, so people can not stop asking, but know the answers, and not have to ask them.
And again, not to beat it at worse, but one last kick. Again, that lays ground, I like the idea because that lays groundwork for the next time.
That's right.
Tell me what the benefit I got,
That's right.
in my students or myself as a community member from the last time, with a nice scoreboard and stuff. But that helps to lay that seed for it. It's a community benefit, in addition to student benefit, so it leads to that, so. It's a addition.
And then finally, this last goal was directly from the conversation, that we had, with Jay, was specifically about board communications and consistent communication. Not knowing you couldn't access your email, but, what does that look like? We're trying to make sure those processes and protocols and methods are streamlined and get feedback to say, how can we do this differently or better?
On this one, and I know it's not your job specifically to do this, but Mark, I think Mark's words were, I wrote it down, cultivate compromise on controversial issues. I don't know if there's something along those lines that we can add into this communication or not. I know it's not your job for us to agree on everything necessarily, but something to think about.
I don't have any problem with these goals. My personal opinion is that I think they mostly fall within the strategic plan or within your day-to-day operations. But I'm not complaining about those. The one thing that is missing to me, and you've approached it here already, Andrew, and it came up in your performance appraisal, we have, to me, the greatest issue in our district right now is division. We hear about parents who are upset. We hear about teachers who are upset with the board. We have a consistent pattern of 3-4 votes. And that's unacceptable. That should not happen. Because when you have, I don't mind 1 or 2 occasionally voting no, and I think that's probably a healthy thing, but when you have a pattern of 3-4 votes, it's a pernicious and malignant environment. And that to me would be, if I could give you one goal, it would be to bring harmony to the board. It would be to bring harmony between the teachers and the board. Because that to me is the greatest need of this district right now.
And that's our job.
No, it isn't.
I agree that it's our job to set a goal to facilitate, the way we are perceived as a board by the community and by the staff.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Dawn. I have suggested that we meet with the community. I think that you or Kim objected to that, but
No,
again, I think this has to
I'm not
be.
saying meeting, but the way in which we present ourselves and the way in which we support the very people that we hired to represent our school. I think we can do a better job.
So I agree with what Mark has said. A lot of the things on these goals are things that I think are in the strategic plan or part of the evaluation process. What do we need Dr. Vanderlecht to do to help right now move this district forward? And I agree with Mark. It's how do we repair the relationships between the employees and the board? The issue is we can't reach out to the employees with a policy. And there's a policy that the employees can't reach out to the board. Everything has to go through the superintendent. So unless we're gonna change those policies where I can reach out to a teacher and a teacher can reach out to me, Dr. Vanderjack is the conduit. He's the critical piece in that. Now what that looks like, I don't know, but he's key in this. And there's a lot we can do, but he's key in this. I can't reach out to the employees. I can't just go. We have a policy, unless we're gonna change the policy. But as I read the policy, I can't just email a teacher. They can't email me when they have a problem. Everything is supposed to go through the superintendent.
On the other hand, they all can watch the video or attend the meeting, and they have. And that's where they see, the disconnect. I don't know that individual conversations board members may have had with teachers at a basketball game, whatever, is what the problem is. I think it's how they see, the board function and some of the things that have been said at board meetings. And again, in my opinion, that's not on Doug, because we all use our words, we all decide what we say or don't say, we all decide how we vote. That's not Doug, that's us. And that's again why I'm glad we're still pursuing reviewing the code of conduct, because although I recognize that Doug in central office can set a tone, that's not the same thing as how we vote, what we say, and how we appear. Because for every person that's here in person, whether it be a teacher or a staff member, there's probably 10, 20, 30, 40 people that are watching the videos. And that's why I feel it's just as much on us, because we can control what we say here, we can control how we act, and we can control how we vote. Doug can't do that. He can be a facilitator and create culture, but he doesn't control the board. We control ourselves.
Well, let me just respond if I could. I don't watch the videos of the board. I tried to look at one today and it's boring, if you'll forgive me. I don't see a lot of combative things going on over there, maybe now and then. And I don't mind if there are combative. That's probably healthier than Harvard if it's talking in the parking lot. But it's not a lot of that you can see on this board of us saying bad things or awful things. But to go to just an example, I'm not trying to re-evaluate rule, but just use that as an example. I don't know how long it was when we dealt with rule. Now, if I'm the leader of a group and I've got a 3-4 vote, and I know that, I would not want to move forward with a 3-4 vote. I would want to sit down and have this group come up with something else so that we could have at least a 6-1 vote. But that's not just on rule, that's just an example. That's been the pattern of 4-3 votes, and that shouldn't happen. And as the leader, there should be a sense of bringing coalescence, and if this program is going to divide us, let's find something else to move us ahead. And I think that is a responsibility of the superintendent.
I feel like I'm living in the middle on this, because I think people are bringing a lot of good perspectives to this, and you're 100% right. We're responsible for everything we say and everything in these meetings. And, you know, I walk out of like Thursday's meeting really encouraged, and I feel like if you look at the last half of 2023, I think we had a whole lot of votes that weren't darn near unanimous. Yeah, there were some things we dealt with at the beginning of the year and all of that, but I was in a couple of three of our buildings on Friday. I had staff in each building come up and say, hey, that's like a normal board meeting. Like, there was a public comment, y'all got along, you were all, you know. I think we have to continue to model behavior going forward. And I think maybe even tonight, I mean, we've touched on some things that I think 7-8 months ago might have been a little bit more combative, but like there's a gained mutual respect, relational capital that we're building here. The communication thing still is near and dear to me, and I think we can continue to model it and own it here. But to Barb's point, there's a few outstanding staff board communications that I don't think have fully been addressed. I don't think I fully understand where some of it comes from. And to a point Mark's made many times, sometimes you just gotta sit down and talk it out. And I get, you know, again, there's still a relational capital that needs to be built in different areas, but I really wanna start somewhere. Because I always look at, we're the only people here in the district that every meeting is recorded, so everybody can see how we're living out our lives, and what greater way to set an example to our students than for people that have different worldviews and different opinions to come together. And we talked about it, you just have an amazing staff, so it bothers me when there is this outstanding frustration. Again, I don't fully understand. Let's just talk these things through, so at least we understand and can come to some agreement on things. And I think that's where Doug comes into play per our policy. I'm not asking you to be the mediator, the arbitrator, but I want to respect the process. And it would be one thing is pick up the phone and call somebody, but again, I want to respect the process. I think that's where we kind of, that's where this becomes a goal.
you know, I've got a couple of things to say here. I partly agree with what Mark said about the votes, but really, when I look back on most of the votes, I'd say 90% of them are 7-0, okay? But the most important ones to me are 4-3 votes, one way or the other. And, you know, if it was only about the bond issues and stuff like that, I wouldn't be sitting at this table today, okay? Because, I mean, how you spend your money is not as important to me as some of the other issues that I champion sometimes. And so I don't think those are gonna go away. I really don't. And there's nothing wrong with a 4-3 vote. You wish they could all be 7-0, but 4-3 votes and 5-2 votes are sometimes the way it's gonna be. A few times, Dawn, you've alluded to, you know, what people see. I go back and I look at all these meetings, okay? And what people see is there is some disagreement about what goes on, but I don't see people raising their voices. I don't see people disrespecting each other. I see different points of view that are being articulated in a sometimes strong fashion. But the fact of the matter is that when I look back at what people are doing and saying, I may not agree with what they're saying, but I very rarely walk away from this place thinking that was disrespectful towards me or anyone else about what they said. I may not agree with them, okay, but I don't feel like I've been disrespected. That's the first thing. I want to read something that I wrote a couple of weeks ago in anticipation of today's meeting. And the reason I wrote it down was because it's very important. Words mean things, and I want to make sure that someone doesn't come back and say, well, you said this or you said this. I am disappointed that the evaluation tool that must be used to grade Dr. Vanderbeek does not provide the opportunity to address the most important factors involved in an executive position such as superintendent. And this is an executive position, okay? A lot of the things that we talked about in that tool that we used were task items and things that lower level people would be dealing with for the most part. Not the most important part of his job, but that's what we have to deal with. So that's what we use. By far, without exception, the most important issue with his position is leadership and managing the people working for Hudsonville Public Schools, responding to the community, and working closely with the board. And when I first started on this board, I did not clearly understand the sharp cutoff between what Dr. Vanderbeek wanted as far as us going to him with, quote, everything, and not going to see other people. But when he asked me to do that, I have respected that, and I have not gone to other people in the last several months because of that. Now, that puts a huge burden on you, because everything that we have is gonna come to you, okay? And I understand that. But this is the only area, this is the only time where we have an opportunity, or one of the few times that we have an opportunity to get something formally in stone about what we want done. These groups, which I talked about, the community and the board and the employees, are not independent silos, but rather groups which must be in close alignment for the best possible success of educating our children. I believe that Dr. Vanderbeek has many qualities which would allow for much success. And I've stated that at several meetings. At the last meeting, when he was talking about the situations with the schools and snow days, okay, that is a killer. Okay, I've had to deal with issues like that where you have those things, and you're gonna have half the people that are gonna be ticked off no matter what you do, and the other half who are gonna be ticked off if you do something else. And I think you said, on Monday, my inbox was this group of people, on Tuesday was this group of people. I sympathize with that, and I think you do an outstanding job in handling those types of things. So I want to commend you for that. I also believe he has chosen, even though with all the good things, I also believe you have chosen to manage your position not in a way that serves to align the groups mentioned above, but rather to isolate them, and in some ways foster mistrust between them, and in doing so act to take the eye off the leadership performance, and instead cause the focus to be on conflict and discord between staff and community, and staff and board. Okay, and I've got 9 separate incidences over the last year that I've talked to Dr. Vanderjagt about, which I think states that, which to me shows those types of things. Unfortunately, that does not diminish the fact that the staff is frustrated with not only the board, but also their professional leadership. And if you got anything out of the source stuff, the comments about the leadership of the district, there were a lot of unkind things said there, just like there were about the board. So everybody is getting pot shots taken at it. Here is what we need from our superintendent in what used to be a fast-growing district. A leader who inspires others with a shared vision for the future, respects and builds upon the caring, welcoming culture and exemplary reputation of the district, develops effective strategies to manage a fast-growing student population, establishes the highest levels of honesty and integrity, and engenders the trust of others. A strong relationship builder, embraces the positive culture, values, and beliefs of Hudsonville Public Schools and the community, promotes collaborative leadership with staff, community, and board. These problems that we're having with the staff saying that they don't like the board, I'm not asking you as a superintendent to just stay out of the way. I'm asking you to get into the fray, and I'm asking you to do everything possible within your unique positional abilities to bridge the gap that we have. And if there's things that you see that I am doing specifically that can cause this division to be there, I want specifics and I want to hear about it, so that then I can explain why I'm doing things, or else I can take a step back and say, you know what, I'm going to do that a little bit differently. Now, when I had these things that we need from our superintendent, I did not make those up. I went to the superintendent selection criteria that was developed by the board in 2018. Who was on the board in 2018? Is anyone here? Mark? Ken? Dawn? Okay. All of these things that I said we needed in a superintendent came directly from what you were looking for in a superintendent. Have those things changed since 2018? I don't think so. I think we'd still be looking for the same person, right? That's what I want you to do, Dr. Vanderjagt. I want you to get in there, and I want you to be able to bridge these gaps that we have in a way that only you can do it. I can't do it. And I'm gonna give you some examples. Okay, I'm gonna give you some examples of because I want everyone to understand that this stuff is not I'm not making this stuff up. SOAR 5. At the beginning of the year, when I first got on the board in January, one of the things that when I first met with you, I said, hey, I'd like to attend some of these SOAR 5 meetings, focus meetings. You said to me that wouldn't be the best thing to do because I might influence people just by being in the room. Well, as a superintendent, could it be that you could influence people just by being in the room? Okay, if I would have thought about it more, I would have probably pushed a little bit to be in that room, just to hear what was going on. The Board of Education millage vote, when we had that 4-3 vote last year, after we had the 4-3 vote, well, and we had that 4-3 vote because some knucklehead brought up something at the meeting that he said he wouldn't do without first talking to the superintendent, and that knucklehead was me. And when Dr. Vanderjack called me about that, I told him I was wrong, and I apologized. And I told him that would never happen again. But the fact of the matter is, we had that 4-3 vote, and right after that 4-3 vote, I said, I will do everything I can to get this millage passed, and I meant it. Later on, we came back to the board because of a request from Dr. Vanderjack, who wanted unanimity on that specific vote. He wanted a 7-0 vote, and we got a 7-0 vote. But we took a lot of ridicule from the community about that. And it could have been very easily taken care of. In fact, at the special meeting that we had, Barb said to you, she specifically said to you, Doug, do you have anything to say about this? Okay, and you could have easily said, you know what? I wanted a 7-0 vote, and the board gave me what I asked for, and I really appreciate that. Okay. Another thing.
Great, let me just interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, outside of the fact that these are things that you wanna say, I'm trying to also understand what part of looking at the superintendent goals this is attributed to. Are you saying these are additional goals?
No, I'm saying that my goal for Dr. Vanderjack is to bring the district together. Okay, I'm asking him to bridge a gap between the staff and the board that he is uniquely qualified and positionally able to do. Okay?
But Greg, you don't think there's any responsibility on the part of some members of this board
Absolutely.
to do that?
Absolutely. But he can only, I can't do the things that he can do.
But you can do other things.
Absolutely I can.
So do we start with what?
We've already spent a couple of meetings looking at ourselves, okay, and we're gonna do it again today. So if we're going to look at ourselves, okay, isn't it appropriate as a board for us to ask the superintendent to do things that he can do? What's wrong with that?
Well, so are you, it's not wrong.
Okay.
So are you working toward a goal? Are you working towards something that should be on there? I mean,
Yes,
I
yes.
respect the fact that there are
Yes.
examples you wanna go
Okay,
through,
okay.
but in the interest of process and
Yes.
time, where are we going, Greg?
Well, I told him that I would like him to, and I've said that all year, I would like him to be a person who bridges the gap between what's going on with the staff and what's going on with us. I thought I articulated that.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's roles we can all play in that area, for sure. Whether it falls into the communication goal,
Mhm.
I think there's an opportunity there. You brought up some past things. Again, there's always history, that provides context for things. I think it's healthy for us not to move on from it. It's good to have the context, but as I stated a minute ago, I really think we've been making some really good progress over the last several months. And not to get past everything, I made plenty of mistakes. What are we gonna do going forward? How do we make this, and how does it drive the district forward, help the students most importantly, and again, I'm always looking at it from that standpoint, and I look back to, it was right before you and I came on, I remember sitting in the auditorium, I was in the audience yet at that point, And one of our teachers came up, gave one of the best speeches I've heard in a long time, talking about Hudsonville being a city on a hill. And, you know, we want to continue to have that. And again, I look at what role can we play in there? Because if you really dive deep into that analogy, that story, and you're that city on a hill, everybody's looking at you. They can be really good, but you're gonna take, there's an opportunity for that fall. I don't wanna be a part of that. I wanna be a part of, we've got some really good things going on. There's these few things that we can work on, right? So let's just map it out. What can we all do? What can we all do?
Because people have long memories, Greg. So to Mark and to Greg's comments about, I don't see in the videos that we're yelling at each other. No, I agree. But there have been things said, and a lot of it was probably post Greg and Nick coming on board. There have been a lot of things said that are not easily forgotten. And is that right? No, it's not right for people to hold grudges, correct? That's why we did a yearly evaluation based on the past year with Doug. I understand that these are things you wanna say, Greg, but in some respects, you are making the very point I'm trying to make, in that someone looking at this video might say, there's Greg, he's gotta throw in some more digs to Doug. Instead of coming up with something constructive, he's using examples that appear to be, not nice. Okay, and I'm not saying that those didn't happen, that you don't think that those are constructive, but I'm saying people perceive things differently and people don't forget certain things. And if you've not heard of those things in the community, then maybe there are other groups of people you need to start talking to. Because there have been numerous times, not just from staff, but from other people who have commented about things that have been said over the last 3 years. Again, should we be rehashing things said a year ago, 2 years ago? Probably not. It's the human nature, right? But if we are truly going to keep moving forward, and I think we've done a good job in the last 6 months, to Nick's point, this is where we have to say, we need to set some of this stuff aside, whether we're right or we're wrong, and say, how can we best come up with goals that continue that process? And a goal to say, Doug needs to bring us all together is not really a measurable goal. And it's not really a goal that at the end of the day is going to be as productive as us saying, here's some ways that Doug can help with communication. Here's some things as a board we can continue to work on. And it's gonna take time. And I think we've been making progress, but I don't want us to backtrack so much that people throw up their hands and say, here we go again. It's some of the same things that the board is rehashing, even though the community might be rehashing some of the same things. We aren't responsible for what they rehash and what they say and what they remember and what they repeat. We're responsible as a board to be above as much as possible to move forward. And I don't know how many more things that you want to give as an example, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time here. And I think most of us would agree that moving forward probably entails focusing more on a specific goal for Doug and our district than getting as detailed as you are right now.
Okay, and I respect that opinion, and I respect what you said, Ken. So I'm gonna put that piece of paper aside.
You'd be glad to email it to us.
No, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say to Dr. Vanderbilt and to the rest of you that I believe his most important goal should be bringing this district together. The staff, and I'm not gonna tell him how to do that. I want him to come, I want Dr. Vanderjack to come back to us and give us examples about how he's gonna do this. Now, the items that I have listed here, I think would be perfect examples of things that he could do, okay? Real life things. But I'm not gonna read any more of them, okay? And I'd be more than happy to talk to him again about those, cause I've talked to him before. This isn't something I'm just coming up with that, I haven't had the conversation with Dr. Vanderjack before, because I have. And I told him how I felt about those. So, I appreciate your input, and so I'm gonna stop reading.
And I'll pick up on Nick's point about moving forward, and Dawn's point about moving forward. And, to me, it's a broader leadership, we've talked about as a board, the problem statement, the thing that we're working through is there is, stated in the source survey and through other communication that has come to this board, either directly or through the superintendent, but in many cases directly, that there is, a disconnect between, some population of teachers and the board. And, unless we we could say some on the board, we could say the whole board, I'm not gonna debate that right now. But it's, that's where we're at, and there's probably a collective response that needs to be thought through, board and superintendent. I agree with your well, I'm not gonna expand anymore. I think that's something that we need to think about. I think there's a board goal in there as well. And I might challenge that, that the reflectiveness needs to come from the board first, which we're doing. To your point, we're doing that, and we're heading down that path. But there's probably more to come around that part. And so I'd be reticent to say, Doug, fix that, will you? Because I think it's 50-50, maybe 70-30 on that. And I think that's what we gotta think about and reflect on and move forward, not dredge in the past, but move forward and say, okay, we got it. And I think that's what a number of our constituents stood up and talked about in the last meeting. We just want you guys to be a team, and we want you to move forward as a district.
I often think when we have the 4-3 vote, if we're not voting how the teachers want us to vote, the U.S. is the enemy. If we don't agree with what they want, you're the enemy. But they might not understand where I'm coming from. So, I think tonight we need to be able to move on. I agree with Greg, I agree with Mark, I agree with Nick. The number one issue that I see right now is how do we move forward and how do we bridge the employees and the board when we have policies that don't allow it to happen. And I'll be the first to admit, I know I made one statement and I regret it, and I've always written things down since. But in order to move on, this is critical.
With all due respect, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. With all due respect, Dr. Hoover, I don't think it is I think the moving on has to start here first as a board. I think that, again, we have to think about, we have to reflect, we have to look at the information that we've received and say, wait a minute, the community and the teachers are responding to what they see. And they're gonna see what happens here first and comments made and so on and so forth. And also, I don't think it's locked into a policy thing. I mean, you talked about being in, what, 3 buildings today or something like that? Right. And I go, and others go, and there's nothing to stop any of us from going to a building. I think good protocol, it's not part of procedure, but good protocol is to let the building principal know that you're coming. That's just politeness and respectfulness, because that building principal has to know what's going on in her or his 4 walls, right? But there's nothing to stop us and go, gosh, I just wanna read to kids, or see, or everything going okay? And again, the foundation here is trust, and over time, it's building trust. And I know, I respect your opinion. I don't think it's a board, or a superintendent issue. I think trust has been eroded from the board, and the board has to work to build trust up. Doug can help facilitate the communication and the connection, so we're not going against policy. but I think it's a board trust thing that we have to work on first and foremost, in my opinion. Others can differ.
I think it's both.
And I respect your opinion, I respect your opinion, but
So the question is how do we move on?
But question really is more, move on from this discussion or in for a bigger picture?
Developing a goal. Is this gonna be a goal?
Are we still on
Jay had said
superintendent
multiple
goal?
times.
Yes.
We are still on superintendent goals, and I know Jay had mentioned multiple times, Barb, no more than 2 to 3. Many of these things I believe are in the SOAR, there's things that
I don't
Dr.
agree.
Van
I'm
Der
sorry,
Jack
Dr.
is gonna do.
Hoover, I just don't agree. You have to look broader than
I agree, I think.
we have to think more strategic, team. We have to think strategic, and these are, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I think if we walk out of here with 2 goals for him, that's setting the bar way too low. And I don't think we wanna do that.
Well, we can keep all 5, but I would like to add one, and that's helping to bridge the board and employee relations.
How do we make that smart? Just think about that.
I'd have to look at how to read it, but to help facilitate, board and employee relationships. And
How do you measure?
right now, these are not, a lot of these are not written in a smart format, if you really talk about a smart format.
How do you,
These are not
These
written
are
in
adequate to smart.
we have to think about how to measure, how we.
I might chime in on something that's broad, that broad, and that is gonna rely on board and superintendent involvement. That maybe we're leaving the superintendent, and by the way, we don't vote on these. We don't take a vote on these.
No, they're
These are
mutually
just,
agreed upon.
they're mutually agreed upon, but at the end of the day, you've gotta run the district. You gotta make sure you have goals that drive the district forward. And if you
They're
don't, and you're not
mutually
meeting them,
agreed upon, though.
led by the CEO,
But
led by the
majority-
president of Grand Valley State University.
They per NASB,
So-
per J, they are mutually agreed.
Again, I
upon.
would
It's
encourage
not
thinking
one or the
strategically
other.
here.
You can say it 20 times at once.
I know, I understand, and that's
You have to be
unfortunate.
united and explicit.
So anyway, I might, to move forward, as a way to move forward, I might suggest that we say, Dr. Vanderjack, you're hearing the conversation around facilitating, board staff communication. Facilitate, it's broad, it's mushy, it's fuzzy right now. Can you help us think that through, not in the discussion tonight, but we leave that as a broader goal, not as a smart goal. We wanna get to more detailed goals with, actions and dates and so forth. But it's a big one, it's a broad one that the board has to wrestle with, and that we're asking for the superintendent's assistance in facilitating, so we don't go afoul of procedure and policy. And also so that we can come together, again, as an administrative team and board to look at that. And then we leave it broad, we leave it, and we figuratively sleep on it a little bit, and come back and visit it. And I would propose that we put it under the communication category, and we come back and we talk about it some more, and we move forward.
If we're gonna put it under communication, there'll be report outs. I mean,
We'll
be
get there,
asked
we'll
about
get
it.
there,
I mean,
we'll get to the report outs, think broad. We were talking about a broad issue, and I think the report outs need to be from the board as well, quite frankly.
Absolutely, I'm not disagreeing.
So, yeah, we'll do report outs, we'll get there, but I think that's how we move forward in this case with this topic that we're wrestling with tonight. Put it down there, somewhere, just say, Doug, can you think about it? Don't even act, just think about it. And, help us, you're hearing the topic, Doug. Help us think about this a little bit from your perspective with past boards and so on and so on. And then we'll come back and we'll flush it in a little bit more from the board and the superintendent's standpoint. That's my thought.
This is not me, Doug. When we were meeting with MASB and we were concluding, you mentioned this as one thing that you were going to work on. Am I recalling that correctly, that you mentioned this is one of the things that you will be working on?
I think there's a lot of, I don't have it upstairs, but I do a lot of things that.
Yeah, you had it on your notes, and MASB, John, had his notes as well, but you agreed that you will work toward bringing unity to the district.
As we all do.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have that responsibility, that's the point, Mark, is we all have that responsibility, with the exception of
Let's
this
not
one.
confuse what we're talking about here, we're talking about the objectives for the superintendent.
But it's
Not
breaching
that-
into a broader topic around
No,
this
we're-
topic.
we're- we're
So I don't think I'm confusing
diffusing-
anything.
We're diffusing
I don't agree.
responsibility.
I don't agree.
But you can say it 1,000 times, it won't change.
I don't agree.
This is a childish argument.
We've all been talking for a long time. I wanna make sure that Dr. Van Dyke was, you know, it's a fair request to address an issue and collectively work together, on it. I just wanna make sure we're fair to you as well in this process, if that makes sense, and realize there's a lot of layers to it. Is it something that we can work towards?
Is it fair, Doug, to ask you to work toward unifying?
I think the opposite would be, horrible. I mean, but I think there's so many layers
Yeah,
to
there's a
this
lot of
that
layers.
I can build there's so many things I wanna say right now, and I just.
Yeah,
it's
I-
probably
I-
better
I-
just-
But we,
I don't
but
think
we,
it's-
we can't use this as a measure for his, evaluation. That's, I think, what Ken was trying to say about saying, this is an overall goal. We can't use that and say, okay, let's have a quarterly update, and then at the end of the year say, well, you did great here, you did great here, oh, not so great here. This whole thing, we all have to claim. And so we can't make that a superintendent goal for purposes of his evaluation.
I agree with you, Dawn, and I don't know what the new tool looks like, but the old tool, that tool, I don't know how to describe it, to me, it's not a, I don't know how to describe it, but I don't think that's a word, because we don't even, Doug didn't even, Dr. Van Dyke didn't even provide an update on the goals and the evaluation. I just.
I'm just a little uncomfortable with the wording around, bringing unity to the district. That's an impossible task. Again, I'm much more comfortable housing this under communication. Like, because like, there's communication, and then I'd love to work through it as a board, because I think we're capable of it. More towards more unity, and again, I don't think we've lost any ground tonight. I think it's still been a productive conversation, but we have to just continue to live it out.
I will say that, well, I started my conversation, and I wanted Dr. Vanderjack, because of the uniqueness of his position, and the ability to do things that the rest of us can't do, no matter what we want to do to try to bring unity, okay? And I'm not saying that, you know, we fight unity and tell him he's gotta do it, but I'm saying that that's something that I want you to look at from a practical, everyday experience. And the examples I had here were very unique about things that could have been done differently, that would have won.
Let's go forward, let's go forward.
I understand that, that's why I'm not, but he is in that position, and I'm not gonna, I think that's important, I think that's extremely important. And,
I appreciate Nick's comments, and I'm where you're at, Nick, so.
All right, we're gonna move on to,
So what is the follow-up
I
here?
see these as the 5 goals that Dr. Van Dyke has.
I've got some notes, I'll send it out.
Yeah,
I
a little bit more clarification on
Some of them,
couple of my things.
some of them I've clarified, some of them I probably won't. I've had some, I think Ian had a couple suggestions, I took some notes, I'm not gonna look, I'm not gonna get a goal up that has to do with school colors, but I'm gonna, I'll clarify some things in there, add some things. I've got some ideas for the communication goal to go in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, trip request.
They wanna go on spring break. That's about it. I just wanna share it with you, because I can bring it to the board meeting under consent agenda. It's a traditional spring break trip for baseball and softball. It looks the same, I think probably 30 years, probably look the same, well, Blue Jay, probably 50 years.
It'll come on the consent agenda.
That's correct. So I don't mean to brush over it that quickly, but
Could be wrong.
you can read it.
Yep, it's self-explanatory. All right, policy additions and revisions.
Alright, so I'm gonna go through these quickly just because of time. Ann is here to answer questions. They're all laid out in front of you. This is gonna be confusing as I explain this, but I'll try to do the best I can. There are several policies that need to be adjusted based on the legislation that is going into effect. Some of the legislation goes into effect in the middle of February, some goes in January or July 1. Think about the evaluation stuff and think about that as July 1 because this year doesn't change. Think about all the right of placement, teacher layoff recall, all of that goes into effect prior to because it impacts teacher placement for next year. So I put those in two buckets and I know I'm overgeneralizing, but you have it. Several of these policies at the top say that they are new or reissued. Those are policies that as a district, you did not delete the policies when they changed the other way back in 2009. So they still remain in our policy book. They are being updated. Several of them are just being updated to clarify some language. Some are completely overhauled based on what layoff and recall looks like. Ann has gone through the policies and continues to work with the HEA on what this process looks like regarding what is required by law now and what we can and can't do. And again, sorry to overgeneralize. The bottom line is seniority is not a sole factor when determining whether or not somebody has the right to a job over somebody else. So, and there's a lot of other stuff in there. So, please take a look at them. There's one policy I want to address separately. That's not on here. That's on here, but it's completely separate from this conversation. So, do you want me to go through every policy, not all the changes, but every policy discussion? I can do it. If there's specific things I have.
These were all related to current laws, and this is what Neil was recommending.
Yeah, they were based on the change in law that's coming through, and before, so.
I don't think that's necessary for you to do that.
Okay, it just, if you look at really even the first policy that comes with bylaws of the board, it tells you what, you can and can't do and you can't anymore, because the law doesn't allow it. So all of these are changes to law. A lot of them, they're confusing because it talks about current evaluation stuff and then next year's evaluation stuff. So you'll see in there about the three areas versus the 4. So it's a little bit of everything. It talks about the 40%, then it goes to 20% moving forward. That's a conversation. It's not just, it's a district decision on data versus the state giving it to you. So it lays it out there. Talks about employment of staff. You'll see some that are very simple when it says the superintendent. There's actually one policy in there. Nothing's changed, so we put it in there, but it's policy number 3132 about vacancies. We never pulled it, so it's on there. So nothing changes. So we'll ask for approval even though that doesn't change and go from there. Any questions? Nick? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Are you meeting with the rest of the HR subcommittee tomorrow to go over this?
So you are the HR committee, once I looked at it a little closer, so I met with you.
Broad powers.
Yeah, but I mean, the reality is that there's two pieces to this, and I kind of told you that there's policy changes that we have to have because our policies are gonna be against the law, basically. But then there's also, because this opens up the ability for the HEA to bargain some of this stuff that was not allowed to, we'll probably meet again in closed session to talk about the teachers' agreement.
Once the contract language or letters of agreement will have to go into closed session, that could very well be the end of February or beginning of March. A lot of it's gonna already be in place, but Ann's been working proactively with the union on that.
You just had a couple documents that you shared with me that I thought were really helpful.
Yeah, and I can get those
Helpful
to the rest of the room.
for everybody else, kind of
Sure.
current state versus future state.
Yeah.
This is.
You don't like all the stricken language and the added language on it?
Well, thankfully I had the short and sweet version for Ann before I started to read this. That'd be helpful for everybody else. So
Yeah, in the document.
We did share some of that in an update a while ago, with, not that document, but some of the
Yeah.
other, from the
from the Chris Glass.
From Chris
Yes.
Glass, had the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
chart on there.
Yeah, I think that,
Just like the one with the eagle logo, the letterhead.
yeah, I think
And
it's
give it
nice,
to you.
you know.
Just say it.
Keep an extra man.
Yeah, but I think that there's a lot of questions too with, within the law. Like I was just looking at where specifically in the law where it talks about superintendent evaluation versus building level administrator evaluation, and even that has ambiguity into it until, you know, laws are only good until people start questioning them. And so I think that there's a lot to be said, but it's really tight under what we're gonna have to do and what we're gonna go online. So the policies are pretty black and white, like Dr. Vanderjack just said, but there is gonna be more communication, because within the law, we have to post some systems and processes online of what we do, and those obviously need to be systems and processes. So, more to come, guys, is what I'm trying to say.
Ken, you have a question?
I read through everything and only one thing jumped out to me. 10, and you don't have to answer, policy 0122, section V. Decisions on whether to enter, I get the broader collective bargaining thing, but we stricken language, decisions on whether to enter an intergovernmental agreement to consolidate, jointly perform, or collaborate. I'm gonna put a period there. You see what I'm saying? So the board, now there's collective bargaining things in here, I got that. But does the board no longer have, if you end it right there, authority on decisions to enter into intergovernmental agreement to consolidate, jointly perform, or collaborate?
It does not, the board does not have that ability to do it.
All right, I'm done.
Is that the one for?
Page, attachment 4, page 3. Page 3 is in
That's the one which book policy?
It's V as in Victor. Can I draw your attention to policy number 8300, because that is completely separate from what we've discussed. It should be the last one, Barb, I think. Yeah, it's the last one, it's the last policy. So page 24 and 25. So I just want to bring your attention to that policy. It's a technology and business office policy. If you read the very beginning, it's called the Continuity of Organizational Operations Plan, which does not exist. And we've been working with the ISD for the past couple of years on helping support that for all districts. So we don't have a policy that says we have to have one. If the board approves that we have to have one, we have to create one. So we think it's important to have. Jeff Smucker, I'll tell you, Pat is the same way. It's think a broad picture. If something happens, how do we generate payroll? If something happens, what's our communication point? If something happens, how do we take attendance if the computer systems go down? All of those things, we have to work on some contingency plans. And we have them in the back of our mind of what to do. COVID was not a great example because we had to figure that out. But there are things that could happen. Generator goes down, possum eats the power at the tech, that shut down the tech department, shut down all of our phone systems, those are things. So this is separate from all of the HR stuff, I would say. I just want to make sure you understand this is not a law thing. This is something we think we should have. Questions on that?
Any questions on policy revisions? All right, we're gonna head to board recognition now.
So this is board recognition month, so thank you for all you do. I didn't mean that, I'm sorry. I put a nice article in the Appleseed that goes out next week, regarding the Board of Education. It links to the website. Just thanking you for your service, and I do appreciate it. It's time, it's sometimes stressful, as we sit here having some constructive conversations, but definitely hoping for continued success as a board this year, because we will have challenges that we'll all face when we get those. So thanks for all your time and effort, appreciate it. And there'll be something that goes out to the staff. From there, you'll probably hear from principals at some point saying things for you. Traditionally, that leads into February at some point when we get closer to Valentine's Day, and I feel very appreciative.
Looking forward to the day when we can have an actual board meeting, mainly because of all the beautiful art the kids always presented to us that we've had in here until we stopped meeting in here. And
And I
Well, now,
realized
we
that.
actually still have it, but if you notice, it's all in the hallways
Yeah.
of the stairwell.
Yeah.
Cause that was intentional so that people could see it, and stop and look at it. And we still decorate our board,
I know.
back there with a new building.
I just miss all those little kids' names and all that stuff.
It's still there. You can take a couple home with you if you want.
It's tired.
All right, we're gonna move on to board code of conduct review. We're gonna look at number 16, number 10, which is attachment 5. And something that I would just like to bring up, and I'd like the board to think about, and we can talk about again at our next work session, is, for the board to consider maybe doing the board self-assessment process.
Yeah.
Jay had recommended that, and I think if there would be funding available, and that would be up to Dr. Vanderbeek, if we had someone that comes in and helps us with the result, at least that someone can come in.
Yeah, we did this a couple years ago, and I think there was just we wanna make clear, it's a board self-assessment, it's not an evaluation again on the superintendent.
No,
It's a board, that's what it turned into. It's like, oh, this is a board, has nothing to do with me.
I think it might be good for everyone to think about.
And Jay can facilitate that again, and I think the board did it, got the results to Jay, and then he helped facilitate. If you want, I can have those conversations with Jay, I'll see him.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
get Robin to take care.
I think that may be a good idea.
Yes, I can start that process.
All right, code of conduct, we're gonna review number 6 through number 10. I just have actually a general question regarding the whole code of conduct. And I need to look to Mark, Dawn, and Ken, because you guys have been here a long time. The code of conduct, except for the very last one, number 14, that is word for word from our board member ethics policy. Is that intentional?
Yes, that's where it stemmed from.
Why do we have a policy and then we've made a code of conduct and we have a policy?
It was a yearly review for it to sign up, when I got here at least, it was a yearly review to sign off to remember, because if I asked you to recite all the policies, you probably couldn't, but it's posted on the wall, behind Mr. DeWitt,
Yeah.
by Robin.
Yeah.
14 was added specifically for the reason that there was technology, social media played a role, and the policy has not changed, but that was added.
Yeah, that's the only one that's
2019
different, is
maybe?
number 14.
Yeah, we had a board member who was posting stuff on social media, and so that actually
Extended the conversation.
precipitated this whole
Yeah.
thing here, yeah.
The last school. The rest of them were part of policy.
Yeah, number 14 was the issue, but we published the whole board code of conduct because of number 14 and that one board member.
All right, so number 6, I will conduct my discussions and conversation in a respectful, productive, and cooperative manner. I will listen to understand other perspectives.
The only thing I can say is I apologize to people who I've cut off because of my passion. So if I've ever cut you off, I apologize now, and that's where I see that fitting in, so.
You can see that in some of the email communication that sometimes we send to each other.
I learned a long time ago to sleep on an email.
Emails can convey a totally different feeling or thought than what it sounds like, so you're right, that's hard to.
I'm good with it.
Good.
You know, I think we'll see better.
Nothing else here.
Number 7, I will prepare for and attend all possible meetings.
We had a situation, a number of years ago where we had one, maybe two quarters, I forget, but that did not attend all possible meetings, did not attend any meetings.
And did not prepare.
Did not prepare. So we folded that one in as a result of that at that time. It's an issue with this board, but it was meant to reinforce that.
Number 8, I will be committed to the growth and development of my skills as a board member by attending local, state, and national learning sessions when practical.
I do appreciate your direction, Dr. Hooper, around I forget how you phrased it, but basically, new officers take the 100 level classes. Again, you had some wording around that, but I appreciate your focus on that, and you're pushing that as a goal for the board. I think that's very warranted.
Classes were helpful.
Are there examples, sorry, go ahead. Are there examples of national learning sessions? Are there, that you guys have done?
Well, I haven't done them, I mean, years ago, you went to national ones, but I
Yeah, I
haven't.
went every year.
Yeah.
And, went to Florida, California, Chicago one time. It was really it was an enjoyable time and an informative time if you went to the seminars. If you went just to have a good time. It wasn't so
Chicago, Florida, or.
Yeah, well, I think Florida like now, I don't know where it is this year.
I guess if there's, for anybody,
Yeah.
if there's any opportunities that come up that might be helpful.
And we've actually gone to the national conferences and for the board and also for the superintendent. I think I went a couple times with,
Several districts,
Yeah.
the
And
state,
they were quite helpful.
the state, SB state conference, the whole board goes to, and the superintendent. And then every couple of years, they might go to the national as a group of 8 groups.
Not looking to travel anymore, but
Yeah.
if I could, there's virtual.
State law allows for that.
Okay, we could all go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good experience.
And it usually is, I mean, in the past, those conferences have been covered, by the district.
That's correct, there's a budget for it, we just, there's a lot that's gone on in the last 4 years, but it was also not a desire of the board, I think, when I first got here.
Yeah, I think it'd also be could be, if schedules aligned, which might be nearly impossible, but it could be a good
Have several people go.
relationship, yeah, it'd be a good relationship
Good
building.
time for the board. I only had one complaint one year. I turned my expenses into Art and he wouldn't pay for my beer. He said, we don't pay for beer.
Yeah, that's
That makes sense.
I understand.
Found out the hard way.
It's still true.
I do appreciate, Dr. Vanderjagt, when you send notification of different offerings, like from OAISD, Andrew and I attended something, was it November or December, we went on that behavioral threat management.
Yeah, that was really good.
That was very good.
And you're gonna get another one Friday for an Open Meetings Act webinar. It's virtual, but it takes place the end of February, and if you're interested, you'll get it Friday to let Robin know, so we can sign up. I'm gonna attend, and then if anybody else wants to, I think it's a Friday from 12 to 2 the end of February, I don't remember the exact date, but you'll get it on Friday, another opportunity. And then I can look into, national, even if it's not this year, but next year, when, I don't know where they are, I don't know. I remember as a kid going to the national school board with my dad, because he was on the board, and it was in San Francisco, and I was a kid. And that was an eye-opening experience for a kid to go to San Francisco.
Honestly, I was your dad one time.
I just spent a couple hours in the delightful governance and policy class over the last week. And I'm just contemplating what my next offering is going to be.
I don't know if this is the right spot. Just go back to the discussion about like leadership development and all of that. And I know, Ann, I asked several meetings ago about leadership, because I was in SOAR 4. You said you got something built out already. Would there be an appetite to have a discussion about some type of leadership training as a board that's separate from an NASB offering, or I'd gladly do some work. I've done different things in my day job, going to different trainings for leadership and all that. I don't know if it fits in this category, but just.
I think providing opportunities and saying, hey, there is this thing, is anybody interested? Even though sometimes you say, no, we can't go, I think it only helps to know what might be out there. And again, to Andrew's point, if you can get at least one other board member to go with you, I think that's an opportunity for you both to come back to share what you may have learned or what you've heard. So, I mean, obviously, we all have busy schedules, but the knowledge of some opportunities, I think, would be welcome.
I have a a third-party leadership coach through my work, and it's awesome. Had a meeting with him today, and I'm all about more of that kind of stuff. So I think it's so applicable, not only obviously in work, but through board.
Collective growth, interpersonal.
Correct.
All right, number 9, I will respect and adhere to all legal constraints of Michigan and federal laws. This includes protecting the confidentiality and privacy of students and employees.
It's very helpful to be reminded again today of the FERPA rules. And I think sometimes that's where it's tough when people of the community ask you some questions and are saying, well, what happened with the student? Or, well, I heard that this didn't happen. Or even when we've had some questions about staff, to remember that we are constrained from commenting, from giving our opinion. And reminding ourselves again that we did take an oath, that there are times we don't necessarily agree with the Michigan Constitution or the US Constitution, parts of it, but we did take an oath, and sometimes we have to set our personal convictions aside, in my opinion, to follow what we swore to do, and that's to uphold the laws as they currently read. So you'll see that that's coming from a legal field, that's always been highly important to me. So that's something that I will continue to emphasize when some of our conversations get a little bit into the murky waters.
But I just comment on that one, that you can go through training and training and training, but your OMA is always a touchy area. So, Open Meetings Act, so just be cognizant of that. Doug's a great resource in terms of, are we violating, or Jay Bennett, or Brad Banasic. I mean, there's lots of resources to say, am I running afoul of OMA, or am I not? That's just one that is easy for any governing entity, no matter how experienced the members, to just miss something. And then, we see examples of that playing out in different ways. So, that'd be my other comment.
Alright, number 10, I will recognize the integrity and positive contributions of past board members and consider prior work before enacting policies and regulations.
Not that we want to stay in the past, we want to move forward, as we spent a lot of time talking about. But there were some things done in the past, for a good reason they were done in the past. They may not be applicable anymore because we're 3 times the size that we were back in those days, or whatever. But it's just good to be cognizant and to ask the question, kind of back to the number 6, why did we do it that way? Why do we do it that way? Is there a better way? Ask questions for understanding. Start by asking questions, start by listening, asking questions to understand, and then we can say, okay, here's maybe a way to move forward. That's my reflection on that one.
And I greatly appreciate your base of knowledge and experience, Ken, that, even for those of us that have been on the board for a while, when you have someone else that says, but remember, this is how it needs to be done, or this is how we did it, can we improve on that? I appreciate your extensive knowledge, and I think that's a huge contribution, as a board member for the rest of us.
Thank you, but it's great everybody's knowledge is going up, but thank you, yeah.
The 3 of you, several questions. On the pie chart, I'm still other. In terms of years of experience, my name is on the pie chart. You're like half of the pie chart.
Alright, so that concludes our board of conduct for tonight. We will cover 11 through 14 at our February work session.
If you don't mind, Barb, I will add some of these comments to that other sheet that I had started, so that when we get to the end of this, hopefully we can have a compilation of the different comments to see if there's any tweaking or if there's things that we need to do at that point before we sign.
Sounds good. Yeah, there wasn't anything attached this time, as you mentioned.
Google Doc. You started it.
Yes.
You sent an email, did you send an
Yes,
email?
I tried to, I was
And
like,
it's
did I
also-
share that right? But it's also in our shared drive.
Right, I
Yes.
saw that.
Yes.
I'm not a Google fan.
I'm not either, so I wasn't sure if I did it right.
Is that on the record?
Alright, so we will do is, we've got this, alright.
Sorry, we're roundtable, we're ready to start.
Oh, no, we can do roundtable, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, here's an update from January, we're working on some updated numbers still. When it comes to, some scholarship, at the top right, you can see this, we've got some data I'm still working on getting, and I'm trying to get some other additional, tutor information from 2023. And then last but not least, in regarding to, I thought maybe we'll add a component here regarding the number of books that have been requested to be restricted and the volume of people that have asked. Since October of 2022, so what, 14 months ago, we've had one parent ask for books to be restricted. But I think I'll put some of that data on there so you have access. You can see that we're still monitoring it. To keep close eye. I do want to thank Nicole Ball under Amy's guidance and leadership. But Nicole Ball now has a pretty slick system with a QR code that, teachers know right away what kids can and cannot, and there's only 5 kids district-wide, but it's pretty slick how she's got it.
That's good data to share too, on the air.
Yeah.
Be good to know. Anyway.
So we're gonna add that on there, but just wanna give you a quick update, that's all I have.
Had
And-
77 blue envelope incidents last year.
That's right.
Any resulting deaths?
No, you would know.
I'm just surprised it's so easily divided between men, male and female.
The 7th grade is the peak.
It's statewide, pretty common.
I think it's 7th grade.
All right, we will do a round table.
Real quick, I just wanted to do a couple minutes of kind of, I do really do want to tell you guys something that is starting to be interesting to me from an employee standpoint is just work within that generational workforce. Retainment is just as important as recruitment, if not more, just because Michigan isn't getting workers. And so I sit here and I look at just the people right here, and there's 4 generations of people represented. And if you look at the data and you look at the really interesting pieces of work that's coming out with this, is that there's some real drastic differences from generations. And especially when you get from Gen X to Millennial and then down to Gen Zs. And our teaching workforce as employees here, we have 5 generations. There's just no Gen Zs on here. Sorry guys, none of us are 27 and younger. So anyway, I did a presentation last week with our A team about it. It's just some more things I think we can do with our mentorships and our mentors. And so I just wanted to bring it up. It's good stuff, and it's really interesting and impactful. So.
They did a really nice job with our ad team walking through this. And it is eye-opening to think about how you respond to people with concerns that are not in your generation. It's substantially different to process how they might be looking at something versus me. A hard copy of something versus an electronic copy. A Yelp review, which I know is covered. If I don't like my dinner, I'm like, let's just leave less of a tip. When a Gen Z is gonna be like, oh, I'm getting on Yelp right now.
Yeah,
before they even leave.
or like a comment that is made that someone might not like, where one generation might feel very comfortable coming forward and having a really good one-on-one, where another does not at all, will not ever, but sure will go to social media and say it. And so I think that as we process the work that I hear you all really, really wanting, that's gonna be a key component as well. So, anyway, that's what I have to say.
Yeah, it's work environment and how you retain them, because what they want from a career is different than what probably all of us are looking for. It's just very different.
Except for maybe, you guys are the youngest, right? So, you millennials. Oh, that's right, you too, Aaron, you forgot, you're young.
Just at the end, right?
Okay, I'll keep going.
I appreciate that.
We're not all on the same page with everything. I appreciate the conversation. I respect the conversation. I think there was a sense of compromise here tonight as well. I appreciate, Nick, your guiding us in some discussions in that regard. So, thank you. We continue on the journey.
I'm good, thank you very much.
I'm good. Just along the same lines, I've had informal feedback from some of you about my performance as a board member, and I've shared some also with others. I would just say I always welcome constructive feedback. So if anybody has any thoughts here, I know I've heard from some of you already, but if you have any constructive feedback or criticism for me, I love to hear it. So don't hesitate to do that.
You looked at me when you said that.
Some
I'm all set.
Yeah,
Or every week is.
All right, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Support.
Okay, Nick and Andrew, all in favor say aye.
Aye.